Good morning and welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. Things are, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, they would be. You may remember last year when all around us was doom and gloom, when there seemed to be no way out of the Brexit stalemate, when it appeared that all hope was lost. Remember that feeling of frustration, of hopelessness, of a complete and utter lack of control over events, those endless days in the home of common sense, in the tent of common sense on College Green in Westminster? Well, you might also remember that I was one of the lone voices at the time who said it would all come out in the wash, that it would be all right in the end, and no matter what Boris Johnson would get Brexit done. And that, my friends, is precisely what happened. We left the European Union on January 31st, 2020. Now, I also said that everyone obsessing about the detail in the agreement shouldn't bother, and so that has proved as well. Today, we learned the Prime Minister actually thinks the Brexit deal that was done never really made any sense in the first place, and now he wants to rewrite it, which has caused all sorts of panic in the ranks. Seemingly some Tories are saying we mustn't water it down. Other people are saying, well, what difference does it make if we leave without a deal? In fact, we'd rather leave without a deal than leave with a bad deal. The question is Boris Johnson right? Will he be able to forge a better deal? Or are we now 37 days away from leaving without a deal altogether? And let's face it, the biggest question really is, does it actually matter? We'll be asking Richard Tice, chairman of the Brexit Party, this morning what he makes of it all. 0344 499 1000. Coming up later on, we'll be wondering as well why no one saw the furlough scheme being abused by unscrupulous companies and individuals. So far, HMRC thinks that as much as 3.5 billion quid may have been lost thanks to frauds and blunders. The sooner it ends, the better, surely. Get people back to work, get people back to normal, get people away from this nonsensical society that we seem to have created of dependency, right? And of course, we'll also be checking out the Duke and Duchess of Netflix, Harry and Meghan, who have now achieved financial independence, we are told, and paid off the £2.4 million they owed us for Frogmore cottage. It's about bleeding time, isn't it? Oh, finally, he stopped taking money from his dad. He's only 35. Blimey. 0344 499 1000. We'll be checking in with Georgie Frost on the holiday front after several Greek islands were added to the quarantine list yesterday. And we're joined by Lord Sugar, who will give us his views on the nation returning to work, how soon they're going to do it and why they need to. Most of all, of course, we want to hear from you too. Your hopes, your fears, and what you're hearing on this back-to-school week. You're listening to me, Mike Graham, right here on the fastest-growing radio station on the planet. It is, of course, Talk Radio.
Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio.
Front pages this morning filled with all sorts of doubts about Brexit. I've already heard on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show this morning several guests, going on and on and on about whether the Brexit deal is going to be the right deal, whether or not we're going to hit the cliff edge, whether or not, it's all the same old language that we heard months and months and months ago, which I thought people had forgotten about. The doom and gloom mongers who tell us that they can't come out of their homes now because they're frightened of COVID-19 are still the same people saying, oh my God, we're going to leave the European Union, it's all going to be terrible, it's all going to be awful, for heaven's sake, do cheer up. Let's talk to Richard Tice, chairman of the Brexit Party, a man that knows a thing or two about negotiating with the European Union. Richard, a very good morning to you. Good
morning to you, Mike. It's like old times, isn't it?
It really
it's quite
is.
Extraordinary, all these doomsdayers, so terrified of the fact that they seem to forget, we've already left the European Union. We've had a crisis in between, which has caused all sorts of problems. And the truth is, Mike, that relative to the other challenges we've got as a nation, with our economy, with millions of people losing their jobs, with getting out of this COVID crisis, actually, whether or not we do a trade deal with the EU, it's like a pimple on the nose of the other challenges we've got.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And of course, The Guardian this morning, Richard, true to form, has a headline that says, Brussels collapsing trust in the Prime Minister revealed in leaked EU documents. Well, good. I'm very glad that Brussels doesn't trust the Prime Minister, and I'm very glad that he's messing about with them.
Well, let's be honest. We don't trust Brussels either.
Right.
And given the way that they've been negotiating, with this, through the recent months, Monsieur Barnier basically refusing to offer what he's previously offered and signed. The EU's offered and signed deals with the likes of Canada, South Korea, Japan. Actually, in my view, they've demonstrated a lack of good faith, which is a fundamental tenet of any form of negotiations like this.
Yeah, exactly right. And
the reality is, if they don't demonstrate good faith in these negotiations, then we're perfectly entitled to say, actually, they've already breached the tenet of the political declaration and the tenet of the withdrawal agreement, because the two go hand in hand. And people seem to forget, the very basis of the Article 50 on which you leave the European Union says that you have to set out with the withdrawal agreement the framework for future trade. Well, if they're not entering into future trade in good faith, then frankly, the whole thing potentially falls apart.
Right. And lots of this conversation now surrounds the issue of Northern Ireland. And I mean, I was rather incredulous this morning to read a statement which said, well, we may have to do a deal which covers Northern Ireland without getting the sign-off, if you like, from the EU. Well, frankly, I don't see why they need to sign it off. You know, they're going to tell us that, well, because the Republic of Ireland is part of the EU, we must be party to any agreement. But actually, I don't think they do have to be party to any agreement between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK.
You're absolutely right. And those people saying that haven't properly read and understood the terms of the withdrawal agreement. I think it's clause 38 that makes it very clear, regardless of everything else in the withdrawal agreement, the EU recognises that the UK is a sovereign, independent nation and that nothing will get in the way of that. And as a sovereign, independent nation, we can determine if, based on our domestic laws, what is the trading relationship between the four components of the United Kingdom? In this case, between the other three and Northern Ireland.
Right.
And so it's actually up to the UK government to determine how goods are treated as they move from Northern Ireland to the rest of the United Kingdom.
Mm. And do you think Boris is right when he says that basically the deal that was originally sort of signed and sealed doesn't make a lot of sense? Are there bits of that you worry about?
Look, the truth is, we said day one that there were bits of it that we weren't happy about. That was very much part of the basis on which the Brexit Party stood in the general election. And we all knew at the time Boris was bluffing and blustering his way through. And I guess really people, when they voted, they basically trusted him to sort it out. It'll be all right on the night. Let's get over the finishing line. That's what he did. As you said earlier, we'll get there in the end. And that's the view that people took. But we knew it wasn't, it was far from perfect. But people said, well, let's get it over the line and then let's keep negotiating and see where it takes us. But, in business, Mike, we all know no deal is always better than a bad deal. When I founded Leave Means Leave, it was straight after the referendum. I coined that expression. I was delighted when Theresa May used it in her Lancaster House speech. That was the only thing that she ever delighted me about, because thereafter she reneged on everything.
Right.
But in business, that's the reality. And no deal is always better than a bad deal. And if I actually think that at the 11th and a half hour, something will be cobbled together. It's how the EU does business. I think there'll be some form of partial deal where both sides can say they've maintained some red lines, but actually for the vast bulk of goods and things, there's no tariffs. Look, we might end up with a situation where there's a few tariffs on a few goods, or where services is not as perfect as it previously was. But as I've said before, time and again, what we've learned from this COVID crisis is actually we mustn't be so reliant on this form of just-in-time global supply chains, whether it's from the EU or the rest of the world. We need a much more resilient supply chain, which is domestic. And we've learned that actually the opportunity is to make British, it's to buy British, it's to think British, particularly for things that are critical to our existence, whether it's paracetamol, insulin, growing more food so that we consume 80%, we produce 80% of what we consume rather than currently less than 60%. Those are the sort of things that we need to be focusing on and focusing on, we might need, well, in fact, we definitely will need the ability to use state aid in order to help some of our critical strategic national industries, whether it's Rolls-Royce, British Aerospace, businesses like that, British Airways. Some of these businesses are going to have a terrible time over the next few months, and we need the ability, if necessary, to move at incredible speed to help them out.
Well, this is it. I mean, given the amount of subsidy that's currently washing around inside the Treasury, the fact that we've got so much money being given away that at least £2.5 to £3.5 billion apparently has been fraudulently removed from the Treasury by the furlough scheme and unscrupulous employers. The idea that we would somehow lock ourselves out of any ability to help companies is a madness, isn't it?
It's complete madness. And there is, for example, the government has recently made an investment in a satellite business, OneWeb, which is extremely sensible. It's a big investment in new technology. It's just the sort of thing that we should be doing, and we need to retain the right to do that on a very fast basis, and we need to be incredibly competitive. I want the UK to be the Singapore of the West, just off the shores of continental Europe, incredibly successful, being patriotic consumers, growing our own food and produce, making our own goods, and if they're quality goods and we offer them at the right price, they'll be bought around the rest of the world. So, it's a huge opportunity, and people worry about a bit of disruption here and a bit of disruption there. My word, we put up with a huge amount of disruption throughout this year, and actually people have worked out, there's a lot more things to worry about than a few lorries being a bit slow in and around Dover. I tell you what, folks, companies have had plenty of time to prepare for this. The truth is what they're doing is they're saying, well, we can use other ports. We can use Southampton. We can use Folkestone. We can use Felixstowe. Yeah. There's a variety of different ports that can be used. That's what companies should be doing with contingency planning. So look, I think with or without a deal, the truth is we've got lots of other challenges. It'll be all right. We need to be much more optimistic, and we need a leader and a cabinet that is much more optimistic about our future potential, rather than a health secretary who's saying you mustn't hug your granny at Christmas.
Well, I mean, this is astonishing. We're going to be talking about that later on in the show, but let's just touch on that at the moment, because we're hearing from Matt Hancock that, we might have to reduce the numbers of people that we can meet up in houses with. I mean, I've got a friend in Scotland who can't go and see his mother unless he meets her in a pub. And you're kind of going, what sort of madness is this? What sort of craziness? The sort of the mind control numpties have taken over. So you're all right to go to a pub and meet a load of strange people. My kids go back to school, right? One of them has to wear a mask in the corridor, but he's not allowed to meet any of his friends outside of school who he's actually been sitting with all day, in case they somehow infect each other. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Totally.
It is completely ridiculous. The truth is that actually, like many other nations, we are now on top of COVID. And, fortunately, very, very small numbers are being hospitalized. Much smaller numbers are sadly dying of this. You're more likely to be run over crossing the road or by catching pneumonia or the summer flu. And we need some positive leadership from this government to tell the story and to tell the truth, rather than to continually terrifying and petrifying half the nation.
No, quite right. What do you make of these stories that Boris Johnson might be looking to sort of step aside at some point before the end of his term? And if he is going to do that, would you find that unexpected?
No, I think, to be honest, that was just a bit of what we call the silly season of August stories, when the journalists are, they run out of things to write about. No, I think that's complete nonsense. Clearly, he is still struggling from the after effects. Yeah. And clearly he's found that actually this is an incredibly serious job that requires, total focus and attention, a real, attention to detail. And that's not one of his strengths. And he's having to learn a bit on the job. But I would fully expect him to regain some of his confident, courageous optimism that we know from the Boris of old. And, what I've said recently, and I stand by, is that if he carries out a reshuffle of some of the woefully weak members of his cabinet, I'm thinking of education secretaries in particular and various others, and brings in some, there is some much better talent on the backbenches, and they move forward with enthusiasm, with optimism, and with a bit of leadership, then actually, they can show the necessary drive and encouragement, and we can get going again. But at the moment, there's constant mixed messages, U-turns, who knows where we are, quarantines here, countries in, countries out. It's just not good enough. And we're all going to suffer as a result.
But you're still supportive of the government and of the Prime Minister at the moment until such time as the 37 days runs out, I guess, and you see what we get.
I'm still supportive of their Brexit position. They need to remain robust. Lord David Frost has been robust to date. I don't think they'll sell us down the river on fishing or state aid. I'd be astonished if they do. We reserve the right, of course, to make it very clear if they do, but I just don't think they do. I think that's the foundation of this Conservative administration. And, if they were to renege on that, then frankly, the foundations would crumble all around them.
No, of course. And finally, Richard, you and I have spoken about it many times, the need for the return of the population of offices in cities in Britain, not just in London, but elsewhere. You've said previously that, this absolutely does need to happen. You talked about possibly coming up with some form of enticement or possibly a tax on people who work from home. What's your sort of feeling about that this week? It feels to me like there's a little bit more activity going on. The train's a little bit busier, still not very, but I wonder whether the return to school is changing things a little bit.
But it barely is the answer, Mike. I am desperately concerned. The holidays are over, schools are back. Train station car parks should be pretty busy this week. My research tells me at various commuter stations around London, they are still, only 15 to 20% busy at best. I'm in the City of London as we speak. It's an absolute ghost town. I'm desperately worried about it. Look, there is a real win-win by part working from home, part coming to the office. But in my view, yes, you can be productive if you're reading or writing a report at home, but you can't brainstorm and come up with ideas and be creative, like you can when you're in an office with people. And, most importantly of all, we've all got a duty, those of us of a certain age and sort of working experience, to pass on our knowledge, our experience, our techniques, to young people, our children and such like, because that's how society continues. And I think that's really important. And it's just, it's not right that people just starting out in work in their 20s are cooped up in, 2-bedroom flats in suburbs of London, not able to come into the office and learn how to help drive the economy forward for the future generations.
No, exactly.
Really important.
I stepped onto the tube at about 6:20 last night to go out for dinner, and literally not one soul on the platform. And this was at Canada Water, which normally would be a really, really busy station at that time. Not even one person. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, so I'm desperately worried about it. I think that, we're in a situation where this is now the new normal. And if people are not coming back this week, frankly, they're probably not going to for a long, long time. A lot more businesses in the capital cities and other cities are going to go bust. Hundreds of thousands are going to lose their jobs. And, for those who are sitting at home saying, I'm not coming back to work, it's all very nice for me. Well, I think we've got a responsibility to society. We can have a win-win, as I say. But if you think you're never going to go to the office again, be very, very careful that, you being employed in leafy Hazelmere or leafy Berkhamsted, suddenly your job might disappear to leafy Bangalore.
Yes. Exactly right. Richard, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, as ever. Richard Tice, chairman of the Brexit Party, talking a lot of sense there about the repopulation and the necessity for the repopulation of the office business in London, in Manchester, in Birmingham, also in Glasgow, in Newcastle, in Leeds, in Edinburgh, in Cardiff, in Swansea, even in Exeter, in all sorts of parts of the country. It needs to happen. Otherwise, it's going to be a big problem. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll take loads of your calls. We've got lots of great tweets coming in, of course, already. Don't forget, if you're not doing it yet, do go onto YouTube, start watching us. We're streaming the show live, as we are now doing every single show here on Talk Radio. We are the new media. We are it. There's no point in listening or watching anybody else. This is Talk Radio.
Talk Radio. Talk Radio.
Hey, by the way, apparently there's been an earthquake in Bedfordshire. Really? 3.9 on the Richter scale, I'm told, if that's what they still use. So if you're in Bedfordshire and you felt anything, do give us a call. You know the number, 0344 499 1000. And we will be very, very delighted to get the latest breaking news from that particular part of the world. Right now, though, let's talk to John, who's a bit further north. He's in Cheshire, Northwich. Hello, John.
Hello there.
How you doing?
Very good indeed.
Good, sir. What can I do for you?
Well, I was listening to Richard Tice's upbeat message over the Brexit deal, and I just wanted to sort of reiterate our stand in this, because we are manufacturers of children's products, colour products, for the education market primarily, although we go into retail in a small way. Yeah. But we trade all over the world. I know all our European customers have no compunctions whatsoever in adding product to their list for catalogues for next year.
Right. So, in other words, nobody's too worried about Brexit?
Nobody's worried. All Scandinavian, all our customers, right across the board, all of them are taking more product.
Right. That's very encouraging to hear. I've always wondered, John, because, being a businessman yourself, the government to government conversations are always off to the side, really. I remember Lance Foreman telling me, you don't need government deals to make trade with other countries. You need to have, obviously, licenses. You need to have certain, regulations in place. But, it's not the government that sells the stuff. It's you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the buyer that buys the stuff.
Yeah.
And if they think the product is good enough,
right.
And we have a superb reputation as a British manufacturer for quality and good value and dealing with people on time.
Yeah.
So that's all that's needed, really.
Good.
To make
so
sure
you haven't, you haven't had to put any sort of measures in place in case it all goes horribly wrong.
No. Obviously, the scare tactics came into play early on.
Yeah.
People were obviously a bit concerned about coming into work, so we furloughed a good majority of the staff. But staff members came in. We took all the precautions necessary and laid out all the procedures for them to operate by. Fortunately, we've got a lot of automated machines, and you're standing 20 foot apart anyway, so that helped a little bit.
Good. And so how have you found the business during this COVID period? Has it been
We've
down?
never been busier.
Really?
We've never been busier.
Wow.
The education market, obviously, because we supply all the big catalogue companies that go into the schools.
Right.
Obviously, they're on a bit of a hold off.
Right. No, sure.
But all the online.
But what an encouraging
suppliers,
message.
Online suppliers wanted to supply the school kids working at home.
Great. Brilliant, John. Well, listen, I'm so glad to hear from you. I'm so glad to hear your good news as well, and so glad to hear your positivity. A businessman, a proper businessman, not a politician, who says, actually, everything is going to be fine. And it's already fine because the orders are already in. Let's talk to Lorraine in Chelmsford. Hi, Lorraine.
Hello there, Mike.
Hi, Lorraine. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. What can I do for you today?
You look like you're good. Everything's going good for you.
I mean, I could do with a bit of a break, but, I'll get one eventually. At the moment, I haven't had one this year, but what the hell? It's not a proper job anyway.
Oh, well, you enjoy it. We enjoy listening to you.
It's lovely to know you're out there. What can I do for you today?
Right. Well, I upset my son's friend on Sunday.
Oh, dear.
We live in the commuter area, obviously, being Chelmsford. And James works in the city, so he came in on Sunday. I said, well, how are you, James? Oh, I'm fab. I said, are you? He said, yeah. He said, working from home, I love it. Now, these are 26, 27-year-olds who've been literally having a good time all summer.
Of course they have.
So I said, yeah. He said, yeah, I'm £400 a month better off. I said, aren't you going to go back then? He says, no. He said, I love it, being at home loads of time.
Right.
I said to him, you do realise that the city will die. So he said, well, I'm spending plenty of money locally. I said to him, but the city actually funds the UK.
Right.
I said, if the city goes down and dies, that will have a terrible effect on the UK
Absolutely
as a whole.
Absolutely right. They don't seem to get it, though, do they?
Said, no, they don't care.
No.
I mean, I live in a street with a lot of people that work in the city.
Right.
They've not gone back. They're spending money like no tomorrow.
Right.
They're moving from the detached house across the road to the big semi-detached to the big detached house, putting up their mortgage because they're saving on their rail fares.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Because a bigger mortgage.
But how long do you think they're going to last like that, though? Because in the end, it's all going to collapse around them.
I said to him, you do realise that those city jobs will go abroad because that is globalisation.
Yeah, true.
I said, so you actually are stabbing yourself in the foot because those jobs will be no more. They just go abroad because instead of paying you what they're paying, and by the way, these people get London allowance.
Yeah.
They paid more money to cover their rail fares.
Well, they should get that taken off them straight away.
Deducted?
Exactly right. Lorraine, listen, I've got to run, but thank you for your call. You're absolutely right. Lorraine is absolutely spot on. This London waiting has to go. If you're not going to go into London, you don't get London waiting. Sorry, I'm not having it. And if you really think that staying at work from home is the way forward, then you're a bigger idiot than you look, as far as I'm concerned. By the way, we have already got some tweets coming in. One from Mark. I felt it in Milton Keynes, he says. The house shook. I thought it was the neighbours slamming a door until you said there'd been an earthquake. Earthquake in Bedfordshire. Whoop, whoop. Let's get some news headlines from Ross Powell.
Talk Radio. Half-hour headlines.
England's Deputy Chief Medical Officers warned that there could be a bumpy few months ahead for the UK if people don't start taking coronavirus seriously again. Nearly 6,000 cases have been confirmed in the last 2 days, with young people being accused of driving the increase through their complacency. But Chief Executive of the British Science Association, Catherine Mattison, says that may not be fair.
There's a little bit of an accusatory tone that young people are going out partying all the time, whereas, of course, the age group 20 to 29, there could be lots of reasons why they're more at risk, and not just socialising. It may be that they're in more frontline jobs where you can't work from home, that they're acting as carers for other family members. There might be lots and lots of reasons.
Wales's health minister says a local lockdown in Caerphilly will not be lifted until October at the very earliest. Vaughan Gething insists a recent increase in cases will become out of control if it's left unaddressed. From 6 o'clock this evening, people won't be allowed to enter or leave Caerphilly without a reasonable excuse. Andrea Leadsom is calling for an amnesty for companies who may have falsely claimed through the furlough scheme. The government has admitted as much, and says £3.5 billion may have been paid through errors or fraudulent claims. And crucial trade talks between the UK and EU are underway in London. Ahead of the meeting, the EU's chief negotiator warned that discussions would collapse if last year's withdrawal agreement is altered in any way. Downing Street's planning legislation that could change the customs arrangement designed to prevent a hard border on the island of Ireland. But Cabinet Minister Robert Jenrick has defended the move.
We have to take certain steps as a backup option so that unfettered access can continue between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, just as we're determined to maintain that in any eventuality between Northern Ireland and the Republic. That's a very important, a seminal commitment. The bill that we'll be publishing tomorrow just enables us to have the power to do so in any event.
A look at the weather. A wet and misty start across much of England to begin with. We're then set for some heavy downpours across the Scottish Highlands this afternoon and in parts of the northwest. Highs of 23 in the southeast.
Ian Collins, weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
Join me, Ian Collins, weekdays from 1 p.m. And not just the latest news and breaking stories, but analysis from every angle.
Ian Collins.
I promise you, this is like no other current affairs programme out there.
Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio. Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio. The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Got a great tweet here from Kierlan, who says, if workers are saying they are just as productive working from home as they'd be in the office, why does every service website you go to carry the warning that staff are working from home, so delays are inevitable? Well, that's a very good question. And certainly we've had callers on this show before who have basically said, look, I can't get anything out of these people who are supposedly working from home on various websites and on various kind of helplines for customers because they can never get me the answer to anything because they're not in the office. It's as simple as that. Here's one from Rob, who says, hi, Mike. We felt the earthquake in Wing, Buckinghamshire. It lasted around a few seconds. Everyone was out in the street, all looking puzzled at the time. And Alan says, yep, we felt the earthquake in Milton Keynes about 30 minutes ago. It felt like someone was rocking my chair. The earth literally moved whilst listening to Mike Graham. Well, listen, it does happen. I'm told it's hit Leighton Buzzard, Aylesbury, all sorts of parts of the home counties. So if you have felt something, do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's talk now to Andrew Bridgen MP. He's Conservative MP for North West and Leicestershire. I'm not sure the earthquake would have reached quite as far as that. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Nice to talk to you again. And a long time since we spoke, really. I think it was just before the lockdown that we had you in the tent of common sense, I seem to remember. And now you're back into Parliament, back into Brexit, back into the same old fear-mongering that's been going on for years and years and years. But happily, only 37 days away, it would seem, from very possibly a no-deal Brexit. Let's talk about the furlough scheme as well, because obviously this furlough farce, as it's being called, is costing us somewhere between 3 and 3.5 billion quid. It's not really the government's fault, but it's pretty dreadful that these unscrupulous businesses have taken some money when they shouldn't have.
Absolutely. I think Andrea Leadsom's got a point. I think firms who have made a genuine error should be given a couple of months to pay the money back.
Yeah.
If they've taken furlough payments when they shouldn't have done. But then it's down to HMRC to relentlessly pursue people who've abused a very generous scheme to protect workers during the COVID pandemic, and they should go to all lengths to ensure that those rogue directors, business owners who've stolen taxpayers' money at a time of national emergency are held to account for this.
I mean, lots of them seem to have done that practice whereby they put them on furlough, but then they make them work at the same time, thereby basically getting them to work for them for free.
What they should be paying that money back, and what we need is a hotline so that staff who've been intimidated into coming to work when they should have been furloughed can ring up and tell on their bosses, their rogue employers.
Yes, absolutely right. I mean, as I say, you can't really blame the government for it because there's always going to be an amount of jiggery-pokery, I suppose, that goes on. And it was a necessity that this was done at the time. But, I mean, it now doesn't need to be extended, does it?
Not unless we have another severe second wave. But the good news is that even though there's been a slight ticking up of the infection rate, thankfully, the death rate has remained thankfully very low.
No, it has. And I think we can probably say with some confidence that we may have seen the worst of it. I mean, I know that people will always say you must be vigilant, and Matt Hancock's always going to say that the disease is still out there, but it certainly doesn't seem to be hospitalising anywhere near the same number of people as it was back in May and June.
Yes, and then a lot of the lockdown actually was imposed to protect the NHS from being overwhelmed, things we saw in other countries such as Spain and Italy, because obviously if the NHS gets overwhelmed with COVID cases, then you've got the collateral damage of people still have heart attacks, still people have cancer, they need treatment, and they become casualties of the NHS system being overloaded. While we've got capacity, we can continue to function with our economy.
Yeah. One of the things that we get asked about quite a lot, though, is the forgotten freelancers, the people who pay tax on a PAYE basis but have not somehow been given any help at all by Rishi Sunak. And it seems out of step, really, because, I mean, Rishi's been very good at sort of, trying to cover off the bits that he missed at the beginning. But for some reason, and I don't quite know what the reason is, these poor individuals who haven't been able to really work because they tend to be in businesses that haven't been open just haven't had any help at all. And they've already paid the tax for the year. Could there not be some way of getting that tax back to them in some way?
Well, I've got a few people in that situation in my constituency who've had no support whatsoever, and it's been a real struggle for them, and my heart goes out to them. I think at the end of the year, having got through all this, yes, I think there should be some tax concessions for people who haven't had any direct support from the government during the COVID outbreak.
Yeah, I'm sure that could be done, and it would be so welcome because so many of them have just lost the will to live because they can't work. But hopefully,
and it would be fair.
Yes,
it would be fair.
And to be fair to the government, and the government has been very fair to almost every other group of people. But yet this group still remains kind of outside the circle, if you like. What about the return to work in offices and things like that? Because obviously, the government is facing a massive problem with the civil service. We were told that Boris was going to announce last week a new initiative to get people back into the offices of this country, but he couldn't do it because the civil service are so recalcitrant that they're not coming back either. Can he do better there?
Well, obviously, the problem was that the government were asking every city office to come back and get back to their desks at a time when possibly only 5% of civil servants were actually in the offices in central London. I mean, Westminster has been like a ghost town. I don't know if you've been round.
Yeah, I was over there about 3 weeks ago. I couldn't believe it. There was literally about 3 people walking down Victoria Street who were tourists and were obviously wondering what was going on because they couldn't see Big Ben because it was still covered up. But all the pubs were shut. There was literally nobody there.
Well, I mean, it's been like sort of 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning as far as the traffic around Parliament is concerned. I had a meeting 4 weeks ago in the Home Office with one of Priti Patel's spads about the modern slavery in Leicester. And quite honestly, the Home Office is not far from where I am now at my flat in Westminster. Probably normally have 2,500 civil servants in there. When I went in, apart from the 3 security guards and the 2 ladies on the reception desk, the only person I saw was the person I was meeting. There seemed to be nobody else in the whole building.
Wow.
Yeah, the government needs to do more, lead by example, and it's all about confidence. Well, if the government's own civil servants haven't got the confidence to return to their desks, how can we persuade people who work for independent businesses to come back to their desks? But I do think, Mike, that there is going to be more home working. A proportion of staff are going to continue to work from home. And quite honestly, if businesses genuinely believe that's a more efficient way of running their business, then there's nothing the government can do to persuade them otherwise.
Well, that's true, but then where does that leave the economy? Because the economy is driven, by and large, by the workings of the inner city, and not just London, but other cities as well. But let's concentrate on London. I mean, Birmingham as well, I'm told, is a complete ghost town as well. What does that mean for the future of, say, the London economy and the British economy?
Well, it would be a paradigm shift. I think the public perception is that it's better to not live in a city if there's an emergency on. I mean, this could lead to changes in house prices and certainly changes in working, but also, as we've seen, who's on the trains at the moment. We're pressing ahead with the white elephant that's HS2 when currently we've got a lot of surplus capacity on conventional trains.
Well, I mean, Crossrail looks like a pretty pointless project at the moment as well, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, we could be events can make fools of us all, and let's not beat around the bush. The COVID pandemic across the whole world could be seismic changes in the way people want to live their lives. I mean, it's gone on long enough that it's not been a blip. It's been months and months and not months, and people have changed their habits. I do feel for all these restaurants and pubs who would have had a clientele before the lockdown. It's been on long enough that even an established business, really, they're like a startup. They don't really have any clientele when they start open those doors because they've been shut for so long. It's a very strange world for them.
It really is. And what about Parliament itself, Andrew? We'll be having our second Prime Minister's questions tomorrow. What is that like for you guys? Because do they sort of pick a handful of you to get in the chamber as and when? How does it work?
Well, you have to put in to be in the chamber. It's only very, very few MPs allowed in. Parliament isn't really functioning. Without a large number of colleagues being allowed into the chamber, I don't feel the government's actually being held to account for the legislation that's moving through. I don't think you appreciate how important the chamber is until people haven't got access to it whenever they want to raise points with whoever's at the dispatch box and the speaker. I'm hearing we might not be back to normal until January, so Christmas. It's functioning so badly for holding the government to account that it really brings into focus how important that chamber is. And the sooner we get back to that level of normality, I think the better. Yes. I think colleagues are getting very tired of this. Only a few people being allowed in the chamber. There's no atmosphere, and it's not really a democratic accountability. No,
exactly right. Good to see you, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. Andrew Bridgen, Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire, establishing really and explaining why it's important to be at work, right? Not working from home. The parliamentary system doesn't work from home. It can't, okay? It doesn't work with very few people inside the chamber in the House of Commons or the House of Lords. It can't work properly if you can't get people into committee rooms to discuss things and to read bills and to make laws. So the same goes for all other businesses. You can't just sit around at home and go, oh, yeah, this is great. I'm really liking this. I'm having a nice banana sandwich with my toddler, who's screaming, lying on the floor. I don't know how to control it. But it's great fun being home. Really? I don't think so. Don't forget, we're taking your calls. We'll be talking to Cyrus Todiwala coming up, who is, of course, a celebrity chef and a restaurateur as well. He'll tell us how his business is going. 0344 499 1000. If you were in the earthquake, we want to know about it. This is Talk Radio.
On Talk Radio.
Coming up, we're going to go live to the scene of the earthquake in Bedfordshire because obviously there's some quite alarmed people knocking about, wondering what on earth happened. I've now just been sent as well the Royal Geological Society's graph, geological survey rather, where you can see the actual movement of the needle where the earthquake actually struck. So if you were in it, do give us a call. We will be speaking to somebody about it very shortly. 0344 499 1000. Coming up first, though, let's talk to Cyrus Todiwala, chef and owner of Cafe Spice, of course, amongst many other things. A regular on Saturday Kitchen. I was fortunate enough to be in his restaurant the other week, last week actually. Cyrus, a very good morning to you. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. Thank you so much for a wonderful evening the other evening. It was great. The food was as good as it always is. I understand you've got a slightly new venture on the cards at the moment.
Well, slightly new venture, yes, because it looks like we may have to move from this building very soon. So
Okay.
it comes to the end of our lease term, so we are looking for a new site, hopefully. And something, fingers crossed, will come up.
Yes, well, let's hope so. Will you be able to stay kind of in that same area?
We want to stay in the same area, not least because we have a very good following, which we, over 25 years, one will expect that. But also because I think the area a little further down is now thriving. There's a new cohort of people coming in, young people, for example.
Right.
Love to introduce to our cuisine.
Right. And of course, the great thing as well that you've been able to do since the problem of lockdown is you've started a delivery service, you've started a sort of takeaway service as well. Has that worked out for you? Has that sort of filled a few gaps?
Well, we had to do all of that just to keep the money rolling in to survive the business.
Yeah.
Not so great in our area, unfortunately, because we are not residentially active in the sense. We don't have a very strong residential population. But also that we somehow fall into the competition bucket of the restaurants that are much, much cheaper than we are. So we suffer from that psychological effect as well.
Right.
But it's been good. It's sent messages out. We started chilled and frozen from our same food, so people can take it further afield, and they can warm it at home and enjoy it. Take a whole meal for a weekend, invite people over, and that has taken off actually.
Oh, that's good. And so now you've got into the sort of pop-up business. I know that you've been working with a few hotels as well in the past, but tell us about what you're doing at the moment.
Well, at the moment we are doing a pop-up at the Royal Automobile Club in Pall Mall.
Okay.
And my God, I think yesterday we were in a rush. We closed the restaurant on Mondays, but they had an SOS call, so we were busy all day. We supplied them some more food, and I've just got an email this morning, so they want more for the weekend because it's packed out. And according to the chefs over there who've been there for many, many years, they said that in all their experience, they've never had a menu at the club do so well.
Wow, that's brilliant. Well, I mean, it is a fantastic. Your menu is fantastic, and I mean, people are going to say, "Well, you keep telling this guy he's great," but you are. And so, and is that something that a lot of restaurant owners are going to end up doing? You know, these little projects off to the side because that's another good way to make some money.
Well, I think restaurants that can do it will do it, and being able to tie up with different people is a very good advantage because it gives you greater exposure. At the same time, more people get to taste your food, which always helps in the long run. And I think we've been friends with the RAC for a very, very long time, the Royal Automobile Club.
Yeah.
Not allowed to say RAC, but Royal Automobile Club for a very long time. And it's always worked for us because it's a good partnership.
Yes, it's a lovely place as well. Maybe you should branch out down. They've got a golf course down near Epsom. They could probably do with a bit of food supply at the weekends.
But I tell you what, everybody tells us to get out of London, go into the suburbs, go into Berkshire.
Yeah.
Those areas. Who knows?
Well,
if the hair remains black for a few more years, I might do that.
Well, you never know. I mean, if London dies, as it may well do, it may well be that you have to be outside to make some money. But listen, Cyrus, I'll see you soon. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. Cyrus Toniwala, chef and owner at Cafe Spice. If you're a member of the RAC Club, you'll be able to get the pop-up stuff that he's doing over there. And it may be a really good reason to join the club, in fact, for no other reason. But lots more of us to talk to, lots more of you to talk to as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've got some great tweets coming in from people who are up in the sort of Bedfordshire area where this earthquake hit, because King Carl has sent me very kindly, as I said, the British Geological Survey Bedfordshire earthquake graph. And here's one from Darren, who's showing me a picture of a load of bins which have been knocked over in the street in Bedfordshire. And he says this: 3.6 magnitude earthquake in Bedfordshire, absolute chaos amongst the bins, but we will rebuild. We will come through this. Mandy says, hi Mike, my mum felt the earthquake in her flat in Leighton Buzzard. This being 2020, I've told her to look out for the tsunami that's bound to be on its way. Mandy in Pinner. Well, listen, people joke about these things, but sometimes they can be quite frightening. I was in an earthquake in San Francisco once, after the big one, the 8.9 that made that road collapse, if you remember. It was back in 1989, a long time ago. I was in the Fisherman's Wharf, Sheraton, lying in bed because it was the middle of the night, and there was this massive aftershock which came in around about 5.5. And it was the strangest sensation I think I've ever felt in my life. I woke up, the bed was moving, the walls looked like they were moving, the ceiling looked like it was moving. It just felt very, very strange indeed. We're going to talk now to Mark Randall, Talk Radio's producer, who's up in Aston Clinton, Buckinghamshire. And Mark, I understand you were right at the heart of it, right at the epicentre.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. Yeah, a few miles away, apparently. I heard it happened in Aylesbury, but also Leighton Buzzard as well.
Yeah.
It was just such an odd feeling. I'd come in after a long night shift, just getting settled into bed, and all of a sudden this huge shockwave just kind of went straight through the house.
Yeah.
I've never experienced anything like it.
It's very weird, isn't it? Did you see the walls kind of rippling? Because that's what I saw when I was in San Francisco.
Oh, completely. Yeah, the whole house just completely shook, and the mirror shook on the wall. And I put a comment on the local Facebook group, and within seconds there were about 50 comments.
Wow. Any broken crockery to show us?
No, I'm afraid not. No, I mean, I'm in the garden now. Everything is kind of as it was.
Yeah, can we have a look around and see what the damage is? Because there might be fences down. Windows broken. I don't know.
Well, maybe the odd roof tile.
Yes.
I don't think even that, to be honest. I mean, it was quite subtle, but apparently it was a lot worse in Leighton Buzzard.
Yes.
So I hear. We'll get the sun out of the
People
shop.
do say that about Leighton Buzzard, mind you.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, not the best place to go. I mean, part of me did wonder if they'd started tunnelling HS2.
Blasting their way through.
Exactly. Yeah. Luckily, it wasn't that.
Right.
But it was such a strange experience. It really was. I did think it was possibly like a sonic boom or something at first.
Can we see if your bins have fallen over? Have you got bins there?
Yeah, I've got the old garden bin there.
Let's have a look. Turn it round. Let's have a look.
Oh, got to turn it.
Yeah, good.
That way?
Well, there you go.
So
I can see the bin.
That way. There we go.
Got a blue. Why has a green bin got a blue lid?
Well, we don't care what we put in, really.
That's really weird. That's very unusual.
It's a bit clashy. That's Buckinghamshire for you. What can I say?
Bizarre. Well, listen, it looks as though everybody's okay then. So there's no damage, no aftershocks or anything like that.
No aftershocks yet.
Is that a window out at the top there behind you? It looks like
the window blew out completely. No, it's all right. Not quite as dramatic as that.
Okay.
So not much to report, I'm afraid, Mike, but it's a very strange sensation.
Yes. Well, listen, stay safe. Make sure that you check all the gas mains and everything. Because that can be a problem afterwards. And don't light any cigarettes unless you know exactly what's going on. It would be my advice. Mark, listen, thanks very much indeed. Mark Randall, Talk Radio producer, does the overnight show here, and of course goes home for a sleep. Gets woken up by an earthquake. Who knew that could happen in the home counties? After all, Bedfordshire. If you felt it, if you've got any damage to show us, by all means give us a call. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk Radio.
Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. Things are, ladies and gentlemen, as I said they would be. You may remember last year when all around us was doom and gloom, when there seemed to be no way out of the Brexit stalemate, when it appeared that all hope was actually lost. Remember that feeling? The frustration, the hopelessness, the endless hours wondering if anything was actually ever going to happen? Your utter lack of control over the events going on, not only in Westminster but also in Brussels. Well, you might also remember that I was one of the lone voices at the time who actually said that it would all come out in the wash, that it would all be okay in the end, and that no matter what Boris Johnson did, he would get Brexit done. And that, my friends, is precisely what did happen finally on January the 31st after a landslide election win on December the 12th. I also said that everyone obsessing about the detail in the agreement shouldn't bother, and so that has also proved to be the case, because today we learned the Prime Minister actually thinks that the Brexit deal that was done never really made any sense, and he's going to change it after all. We'll talk some more about that. We'll take more of your calls, especially if, like one of our earlier calls in the first hour, you're in the business of business, because people who are in business know that it's not going to be a problem, that trade will continue, that is the way of things. 0344 499 1000. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking to Lord Alan Sugar, who is, of course, very much at the heart of British business. He's also very much at the heart of starting up new businesses through The Apprentice, and he's got another one going today. But he's also very, very passionate about getting Britain properly back to work work, properly back in offices, not working from home, and actually contributing generally to the common good and to the economy. Also, we're going to talk about the Duke and Duchess of Netflix, as I'm calling them, Harry and Meghan, and the fact that they've now apparently become financially independent. Well, whoop-de-doo. Harry finally reaches the age of 35 and he doesn't need daddy's money anymore. Well done, Harry. Congratulations. Welcome to the real bleeding world. I had to do that when I was 18, like most people did. Much else to do as well. Georgie Frost is going to join us on the news that 7 Greek islands have now joined Spain and various other parts of the world on the naughty list. If you go there, you're going to have to quarantine when you come back. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to me, Mike Graham, right here on the fastest growing radio station on the planet. It is, of course, Talk Radio.
Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio.
Now, the last time we spoke to Georgie Frost, she was inevitably either on a boat or about to get on a boat or having just got off a boat down in Spain. I think she's now back in the UK, probably quarantining as a result. And a very good morning and welcome back to Blighty, Georgie.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, no, you can't tell me it's great to be back, but I mean, you look as if you've had a nice time. Good break.
Yeah. I won't say it's great to be back. I haven't really seen anyone to say it's great to be back either. Yeah, I am in quarantine at the moment. I tried to avoid it. 6 weeks in Spain. Yeah. I was there, arrived on the 21st, and then on the 25th, the government decided to say, no, I'm really sorry, anyone who comes back, quarantine. Thankfully, I had all my stuff with me, so I just carried on regardless and spent 6 wonderful weeks travelling all around Spain. And interestingly, had a test, I suppose this is interesting, had a test before I came back, also taken another test. I am negative. There is no trace of it in my system anywhere. Right. So that's good news in theory. However, I still cannot leave the house for another 7 days.
That's pretty tough. It's
meaningless.
And it's really tough duty as well, isn't it? I mean, hopefully at some point in the near future, the government will change their policy to make it possible for people like yourself, if you have had 2 negative tests, to just go, all right, well, can we call it 7 instead of 14 at least?
Well, exactly. There are ways in which we can get around it. The Grant Shapps, and you mentioned there about the Greek islands, he made an announcement yesterday announcing 7 more Greek islands to be added, 7 Greek islands to be added. The point of what he was saying was that we can have a clear boundary. If we have a clear boundary, then we can have a difference between the islands and the mainland. So that includes the Balearics for Spain or Canary Islands, etc. But he's also, in that speech, said he would be stepping up quarantine enforcement after a lot of criticism that only 10 people, I understand, have actually been fined. Now, you can receive a fine of up to £1,000. That can go up a lot more than that if you're a repeated offender. But the reality is nobody's being checked. There's a lot of confusion. I had to fill out a form in Spain, download a QR code, which apparently was meant to get scanned when I arrived at the airport. It didn't. I also know of colleagues and friends who didn't fill out the form online before they left, expecting to fill one in when they arrived at the airport. There were no forms to fill out. So they essentially are free to go about their business. But I would argue it would surely be better, having now had 2 negative tests, no trace of it in my blood system either, for us to find a way of testing, which means that people can get back to work. Look, I don't mind 7 days of restricted. I have my views about full quarantine, but restrictions. However, this to me seems, why spend all your money and resources getting the police to go and check on our homes or whatever they're meant to do, because I haven't had anyone check on me. Right. I say that now, there'll be a knock on the door. And put that resource into testing. We heard in the news earlier that they had to apologise that there weren't enough tests at the moment.
Right. But it's a very curious situation at the moment with the testing argument, because on the one hand, you've got, Grant Shapps talking about, not really having any point in testing at airports, even though the guys that run Heathrow have said, look, we're ready to go. We've got a place that we can do it. We can also do the after test, 6 days later or whatever. And meanwhile, you've got Matt Hancock, the health secretary, saying testing is the way. And so there's a kind of disconnect between 2 government departments, and they don't seem to be talking to one another.
The reality is we don't know. We don't know. What they suggest is, and this is just what I've read of the arguments for and against in airport testing, is airport testing would only pick up about 7% of live cases. It takes time for your body to process having coronavirus in it. However, I have read other articles by researchers and the like saying that actually you could do it within 5 5 days of getting back, and that would pick up 85%, which is a better figure anyway. I'm not sure we'd ever get to a stage of testing where we would pick up 100% anyway. And the 14 days to me just seems such an overreaction. And I say this on many levels, and a lot of people have argued, and I've seen it on Twitter whenever I've defended the idea of not having quarantine, have said, oh, but you shouldn't go traveling anyway and you take the pain with it. But on multiple levels, I'm not sure I can agree with this full quarantine. We should be trying, I mean, we're talking about getting people back to work. We've had to Eat Out to Help Out, where the government are trying to get us all into restaurants and bars,
which worked pretty well, actually, didn't it?
It did work pretty well. As to whether the long-term impact will have a substantial difference, I don't know, but certainly in the short term, it hopefully would have given people confidence to get out. But then you have confidence to get out, to mingle among each other, and yet you can't go away abroad and then come back. It's mixed messaging for people. Go out to work, but if you go away to a country that we decide has got some rate that's higher than we wanted to, then it's going to be on the list.
Yes.
I mean, for example, Portugal had that figure, which was above what the government wanted, but it decided not to put it on the list. The biggest problems as well are coming in the fact that Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, England aren't working together on this. So we're working on some dubious data. The testing isn't getting out there. So for goodness sakes, I don't know how they're working out where we're having problems here in this country. To me, it just seems an extreme overreaction. People are not able to go to work, but also the tourism industry is hugely important to this country. I was on the flight back from Spain, and on the flight, the lady gave an announcement and said that from tonight at 23:59, thousands of our colleagues will lose their jobs because of coronavirus, including the two men standing in front of you now. I mean, I was almost in tears. It was awful. But this is the impact of what this is having. You know, the summer is now over. The government's saying, oh, look, we've got this now island rule where you can... Why didn't they have this approach before? Have a joined-up approach. Focus your money on getting some testing, work out the best way to get people back to work, but also get people traveling, doing the things that they want to do to support an industry that's vitally important to this country.
Well, exactly right. And to go back to your argument that you've been hearing about the testing at airports and it only picking up 7%, well, surely that's the case in every situation. I mean, all you're getting when you test people is how they are at that very moment in time. It doesn't mean they haven't got it tomorrow. It doesn't mean they won't have it next week. It doesn't mean they won't have it next month. So if you're going to use that logic, then why bother testing anyone?
Precisely. And also, I mean, I've had the antibodies test as well.
Right.
And there is also talk about the fact that it's mutated. Perhaps that's why we're getting more positive tests at the moment. I mean, I read an interesting article in The Spectator by a researcher that spoke about, you know, perhaps there's traces still left in, it's not actually active, the virus inside of people. So, I mean, the research is still pretty dubious, but this is what we're working on. And so, look, I'm a finance journalist. I'm not a health professional. But what I will say is that as a result of the decisions that we're making with regards to the economy, and I hate this view, and I've said it to you many times before, that this is binary. It's money or it's health. Yeah. It's not. The economy is health. It will have a knock-on effect. EasyJet shutting up their bases in places like Stansted. Think of all of the, you know, the baggage handlers, all of the cafes, all of the people that get their money, you know, from having that as a base there. Their jobs come from that. It's a knock-on effect. I mean, to simplify it, it's like not having a sports match on and think about all the people that sell the pies outside. It's exactly that. Right. And this is going to have a knock-on effect. We've already heard today thousands of job losses, you know, potentially, or this week at Virgin Atlantic. EasyJet again, as I said, thousands. This is having a terrible impact on people's lives.
Yes. And the other big problem, Georgie, which I keep mentioning to others as well, is about tourism coming into this country, not just us going to other countries, but, you know, the fact that huge swathes of this country rely upon tourism. You know, the West Country will probably say, well, we're quite happy to be on our own and we don't want anyone coming here with the infection. Parts of Scotland have said that as well. But without tourism, parts of Scotland have literally got no income coming in at all. No golfers, no people staying in hotels, no climbers, you know, nothing at all for anybody to make any money from. And central London as well, plenty of restaurants which are just not opening up because they rely almost solely on foreign visitors.
Exactly. The tourism industry is hugely important. I think the latest facts that we have, 37.9 million visitors came to Britain in 2018. The tourism industry is expected to grow, or was expected to grow, in 5 years' time to be just under 10% of the UK GDP. It supports currently 2.6 million jobs. I mean, I could throw these stats at you. It's worth 106 billion. This is people coming in the tourism industry here, and people saying, "Oh, well, it's okay because why don't we go rather than go and spend our money in Spain or in France? Why don't we spend our money here?" But the reality is, one, it is very expensive to do that, very expensive, and there are also regional lockdowns. So don't think that your holiday is going to be absolutely safe here if you decide to holiday in, say, Cornwall or something, that there may be a regional lockdown that happens there. We're seeing more of that at the moment. So it is so important. It's so important to the travel industry, but to, like I said, the knock-on, the communities. And yes, I can understand communities saying, we don't want you bringing the virus here, etc., etc. But you also want your community to thrive. You also want people to have jobs. This is so important.
Oh, absolutely right. And as far as Portugal goes, I mean, it's complicated now because of what Scotland and Wales did, because apparently I think the Welsh in particular, have left the Azores out of quarantine, but put the rest of Portugal in. Obviously, as you say, England at the moment doesn't put it in and was expected to do it last week. Do you think they will eventually put Portugal back in then?
Oh, it's hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say you can't rule out anything. And this is the problem with this system that's in operation at the moment. I understand it, and I do not want to criticize too much about this. I understand it's working on health statistics, etc. But some joined up thinking would be very good. The idea of having a clear boundary, flying directly back to the UK, the islands theory now is in theory a good idea. It might mean that we could apply this to Sicily this weekend. I think it's too soon to apply it to the Balearics and the Canary Islands, but it will leave that open. But the reality is, and this is a bit like Portugal, the confidence is gone. The summer has gone.
Yeah.
I can't say to anyone, as much as I would like everyone to, as much as we can get back to normal safely, and to have holidays. And it's not just holidays. People travel for all sorts of reasons, to see their families, funerals, for weddings, all sorts of reasons, for work. I can't, with all conscience, say to people, yes, book a holiday. I just think with thoughts of second waves, we've heard today that we're going to have stricter lockdowns across the whole of the UK. It could be any country, and that's the problem. That's what happened when I was in Spain, and why it was such a big movement that on the 25th of July or whatever it was, that they decided that they were going to include Spain. If it could happen to Spain, it could happen anywhere. And they absolutely, and it can happen at the last minute. So those holiday makers, 60,000 we think on the 7 Greek islands, will have to quarantine from 4 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah.
That is not a lot of time for people to get back, to work out their lives, think about schools, work, etc., etc. So really only go anywhere. Really, I can say this, if you have contingencies in place, if you can work from home, if you know how you could manage that 14 days, because as it stands, it will be 14 days. I hope the government is going to do this dual test solution that they're talking about, where passengers due to travel to the UK can have a test 2 days before and then 5 days afterwards. But we've already seen the problems with having enough tests. I've done 2 tests in the UK. I've actually done 3 now. 2 of them were lost, so I don't know what they considered that or counted that to be done. So are people even getting the tests, and are they being processed properly? But I urge the government, and I've done this before, to find a solution that can shorten that time.
No, quite. Well, Georgie, listen, 7 days might seem a long way away, but I'm sure we'll pass quicker than you know. So hopefully we shall get you back into the studio soon, once you're allowed to come out of your house, and we'll see you then. Georgie Frost, personal finance specialist, travel journalist, of course, as well, back from Spain. Quarantining, though, but as with most people who have quarantined, not heard anything from any member of any authority or anybody checking up to see whether she's actually doing it right, or whether in fact she's allowed to go out because she has to go out. It's a very bizarre situation. If you're in quarantine, love to hear from you as to whether anyone's been in touch with you to double check whether you are actually around. 0344 499 1000. We should tell you that returning tonight once more, James Whale, 7 p.m. On Talk Radio, and tomorrow night as well. He'll be on with Ash until 7, from 7 to 8:30, followed by Kevin O'Sullivan. So look out for that. Listen out for that. James, of course, we want him back here at full time as much as possible, as soon as we possibly can. And we wish him all the very, very best. We'll take your calls next on Talk Radio.
Talk Radio.
Now, for those of you unaware of the breaking news that we brought you a little while ago, there has indeed been an earthquake in Bedfordshire, 3.9, I think, on the Richter scale, we were told. Let's talk to Steve, who's called in from Milton Keynes, who apparently felt it. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Very well indeed. Have you survived the trauma?
I have. The earth did move for me.
Wow.
The office shook. The paths were shaking. I thought someone had hit the house, to be quite honest.
It's quite a weird feeling, isn't it?
Very, very weird, yeah. It was literally like a thud had gone through the house. And, yeah, very strange. I thought it might be Lord Frost banging on the desk.
How long would you say it went for?
Oh, it was just one thud, really. It wasn't anything too major.
A couple of seconds?
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
Not
like those ones you see
dramatic.
in California where the shelves are sort of shaking for about what seems like a minute and everything's falling off them.
Lights swinging. I didn't head under the desk just in case.
Right.
So nothing like that.
No.
But it was very strange, though. Very strange feeling.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you managed to get through it and nothing was damaged, nothing fell off the wall or anything.
No, I'm glad I survived, Mike. It was quite traumatic.
Well
but we're
done.
Still here.
Go and have yourself a cup of very sugary tea. I'm sure you'll feel better. Steve, thank you very much indeed. John is calling in from France. Hi, John.
Hello, Mike. How are you, mate?
Very well indeed, sir. What can I do for you?
What I'm trying to find out, I'm a French resident, and I want to come back to the UK for about 4 hours.
Right.
Do I have to quarantine?
I would say the answer to that would be yes, at the moment.
Does Michel Barnier have to quarantine?
No, that's a very good question. He should.
And his team of EU people who have come across however they came across.
Well, do you know what's
I want to come
interesting?
on Eurotunnel.
What's interesting is I did this right at the very beginning when they first introduced quarantine. There are so many exceptions that you can avoid quarantine. One of them is, for example, if you work for Eurostar or Eurotunnel. One of them is if you are a BBC employee. Illegal immigrants are supposedly going under quarantine. Whether they are or not, I don't know. But they are certainly. We're told that they are. If you are, I believe, any kind of medical practitioner, you can get exemption. So I imagine Barnier and his crowd will be saying, well, we're from the European Union executive, so therefore we have an exemption. They probably do.
Yeah, it's a load of rubbish, isn't it, mate?
I know. What do you need to come here for 4 hours for?
Shopping in Folkestone.
Really?
I do missionary work down. I go to the wholesalers and get proper meat.
Okay. You can't do that in France?
Not proper meat, cut properly.
Okay. Well, maybe you should get it shipped over to you.
Can't, mate. You can't. They won't bring that sort of thing over.
What,
so we come back. Things are much cheaper in the UK. All sorts of things are much cheaper.
Okay.
So
how long have you been living in France for?
We've had this house 16 years.
Right. Nice.
But the last 2 or 3 years, it's lovely.
Yeah.
You know,
and are you having to change your status or anything like that because of Brexit?
Yes, we're in the process of doing all of that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a rigmarole, but
you won't have any problems, will you, if you've been living there that long?
No. As long as you start applying for all your doing all your paperwork soon. We've been doing it for months now.
Right.
But
oh, well, jolly good. Well, if I can think of any way of...
I love your show.
Thank you.
I used to listen to the
Dark Side
Broadcasting Corporation.
Yeah.
Pack that in when
yesterday's news. They are. We are the new media. That's the way to go. There's only one way forward. That's with us.
I listened. I met Julia years ago on a dive boat in the Red Sea.
Okay, lovely woman. Fantastic.
Yeah, she's great. I love Julia. She's a lovely lady.
She's great. Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, John, I hope you solve your problem with the stuff you need to get. I'll see if anybody can help you with that. Maybe they can drive it over for you. You never know. John in France listens to what we call The Way Forward, which of course is Talk Radio, the home of common sense. Why would you bother listening to anything else? And if you are coming over from the dark side, make sure you tell all your friends to come over from the dark side as well. Into the light. right? Because you'll find that it's a far more welcoming place. It's a far more enjoyable place to be. And it's a far more intelligent place to be, by the way, as well. 0344 499 1000. Peter says this: I've experienced 2 earthquakes in the United Kingdom, one in Shrewsbury in the late 80s when I had to run into the road to avoid a falling chimney, and one in Dover in 2006. Well, there you go. You see, there can be, I mean, what I would say is if you are, and we're not entirely doing this just tongue-in-cheek, you know, if you are up in Aylesbury or up in Bedfordshire, somewhere like that, you might want to check, that just make sure that, you know, the outskirts of the house and, you know, all of the chimneys and everything else is fine, because if you have had an earthquake, there can be destabilising things that happen to the structure of your property. So you might just want to make sure that everything is as it should be. And I'm sure there will be places where you can double check what the effects of an earthquake actually are, particularly on the geological survey. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Coming up, we're going to talk to Norman Baker. He's a former MP. He's also author of What the Royal Family Doesn't Want You to Know. He may be, like some people, not entirely convinced of this business of the royal family being paid back the money for Frogmore Cottage by the Duke and Duchess of Netflix, as I'm now calling Harry and Meghan. They've apparently paid the 2.4 million quid back to the taxpayer, supposedly. They've also apparently agreed to continue to pay a sort of rental fee to keep Frogmore Cottage for themselves whenever they come back to Britain. And they've also supposedly taken leave of all the money that Prince Charles was giving them, so that they are now technically financially independent. But we'll see about that, because of course they say that, but will that turn out to be the case? Because they've got some pretty expensive habits. Well, certainly Meghan does. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's get some news headlines with Ross Powell.
Talk Radio. Half-hour headlines.
The government's warning against complacency as the number of COVID infections continues to rise. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer says we're in for a bumpy ride over the next few months if we don't start taking things more seriously. Community Secretary Robert Jenrick says a recent rise in cases of coronavirus is concerning.
It isn't a return to normality, it's a return to a new normal where we can have greater freedom, but we have to do so by exercising good judgment.
Wales's Health Minister says a local lockdown in Caerphilly won't be lifted until October at the very earliest. Vaughan Gething insists a recent increase in cases will become out of control if it's left unaddressed. From 6 o'clock this evening, people won't be allowed to enter or leave Caerphilly without a reasonable excuse. The head of the NHS's test and trace system has offered her heartfelt apologies to anyone who isn't currently able to get a COVID test. Sarah Jane Marsh says the problem centres around laboratories being used to process results being overstretched, but also insists that a series of partner labs are due to open up imminently to help ease pressure on the system. And police have been inundated with calls after an earthquake in Bedfordshire. It happened at around 8:45 this morning, with an initial investigation saying it was a magnitude 3.3 at a depth of 10 kilometres. Stuart lives in Flitwick and initially thought it was the nearby railway line.
I was sitting at my desk in front of 3 screens who all started wobbling, and it lasted longer than a train would going past, and I thought, that is very odd. And then I could actually feel the ground moving as well. And the whole thing, I suppose, lasted probably about 30 seconds.
A look at the weather. We're set for some heavy downpours across the Scottish Highlands this afternoon and in parts of the northwest. Other than that, though, it should stay dry with highs of 23 in the southeast.
Talk Radio.
Your trusted 24-hour resource for breaking news and non-stop conversation.
We've paid for drones and we've offered the use of an aerial surveillance aircraft to the French.
Unparalleled radio for unprecedented times.
The reality for the UK is that we are sovereign and the EU has to deal with a sovereign nation.
Online, on DAB and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio. Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio. The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Now, we found out just the other day, did we not, that Harry and Meghan, that would be Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who are, of course, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, bizarrely still the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. I'm not quite sure why they're still allowed to be called that. I prefer to call them now the Duke and Duchess of Netflix, because they did a deal with the giant television company, live streaming company, of course, as well, to do what they think could be worth something like $100 million worth of business, with them filming all sorts of things, producing all sorts of projects, many of them, they say, to do with the family, which, as Piers Morgan pointed out, is rather ironic, considering that basically they both dumped both of their families and they don't really seem to see them at all. Harry supposedly was going to come back to Britain to see his granny, to see his dad, but he hasn't been back since they emigrated to Canada, and then shortly thereafter moved into this massive mansion that they've bought over in Montecito, just near Santa Barbara, north of Los Angeles. Now, apparently, according to those who know, this deal that has given them all this money, although it hasn't yet, which is why I come to the next part of the conversation, because we're about to talk to Norman Baker, who's the author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know, which has just been updated in paperback form and just been released as well. Here's the thing. They're going to make something like 2 to 3 million quid a year, they reckon, from this, right? Now, supposedly, they were getting 2 to 3 million a year from Prince Charles. They're now supposedly financially independent. They've supposedly paid back 2.4 million to the Crown for the Frogmore cottage renovations, which is what it cost. And they're still supposedly going to be paying some money for the upkeep of Frogmore cottage, because that's what they're going to use as a home if and when they do come back, even just for a visit. But let's talk to Norman Baker about this, because apparently, apart from anything else, they've got about a £40,000 mortgage on this mansion they bought with 16 bathrooms, which doesn't sound terribly green. 5-car garage as well, of course. Norman, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Very well indeed. Now, I'm not sure I'm buying this financial independence business because, first of all, 2 to 3 million, as you would know, Norman, is not going to keep the Duke and Duchess of Netflix in Champagne for very long, is it?
No, it's not, and we'll have to see what Netflix provides for them. But clearly, they're spending money like water, so it's going to be difficult for them to make ends meet if they're going to carry on at this rate.
Well, that's
but
what
I mean, the interesting thing for the taxpayer of Britain, because that's what I'm interested in. If they want to go off and become Netflix stars at no cost to us, then that's up to them in a way. But I'm still concerned that they're a burden on us. They're keeping Frogmore Cottage. That is, by the way, it belongs to the Crown Estate, not to the royal family,
right.
and therefore it's public building in that sense. Because the Crown Estate is not a royal thing.
So who will they have? So will they have paid the 2.4 million back to the Crown Estate then?
Well, no, they haven't. This is the thing. They've paid it to the sovereign grant, which goes to the Queen. So, in a sense, it's not going back to the taxpayer at all.
Right.
The problem with that, actually, was that the Queen just gave them Frogmore Cottage. It wasn't actually hers to give. It belongs to us, the Crown Estate. But leaving that aside, there's still going to be security, 24-hour security, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's going to cost £1 million. That's paid for by the Metropolitan Police, comes out of taxpayers' money. So we're still paying for that. If Harry and Meghan come across to the UK, we'll pay for their travel because they've kept our HRH status. This is important because when Princess Diana became divorced from Charles, she lost the HRH status and was entirely independent and had to fund everything herself. Because he's kept that status, we can still pay for security, we still pay for the travel. So once again, he's having the best of both worlds. He's opting out of the royal family, but we're still paying for matters. And of course, he's using the royal family intro in order to give himself all these deals with Netflix.
Well, of course, because they wouldn't be at all interested in these two if they were just ordinary members of the public. But is there some kind of duty of care that we have to have for Prince Harry, because he is, albeit quite a long way from being heir to the throne, he's still an heir to the throne?
I think Prince Harry has to make up his mind, and he has done largely. Is he in the royal family or isn't he? And I'm perfectly happy if he wants to leave it. That's up to him. And he should be entitled to do that. No one should be imprisoned in the royal family if they don't wish to be. But if he's going to leave the royal family, he can't then expect us to pay bits and pieces around the edges. And nor should he, frankly, be exploiting his mother, which he seems to be doing, or proposing to do, in some of the stuff he's doing for Netflix. She's complained over the years about the media and the way they treated his mother, with some justification, I might say. And now he seems to be exploiting her memory in the same way, which is a bit tacky.
Well, it really is. And also, ever since their sort of dispersal off to California and Canada, which was where they went first, Vancouver Island, you know, they seem to be doing more publicity than ever. I'm also told that she's launched a new lawsuit against Splash, the picture agency in Los Angeles, who took a picture that she says they shouldn't have taken, even though she was walking down a perfectly public area, as far as I can tell. So she's got this obsession with protecting her privacy as long as it's anybody who doesn't actually make any money for her. But if it's somebody who does make money for themselves and who takes a picture and then she buys it and somehow sells it on and makes it into an Instagram post, that's fine.
Yes, it's double standards, Mike. And you know, if someone's in the public eye and wants to use their image to promote themselves, they can't then complain when someone else uses their image for different purposes. I mean, they want to control the media, but the media is not there as a PR machine for the royal family or for Harry and Meghan. It's there to report the news.
Exactly.
And that's what it should be doing.
Exactly right. But as Piers Morgan used to say, it's when they do these interviews as well, and they give permission for people to talk on their behalf, and this new book that came out, which was written by obviously somebody who was very much in the inner circle, basically they're invading their own privacy. They're giving people access to their lives, so therefore people have access to their lives. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, they can't have a situation whereby they control the images, they control what goes out, and they create this image of themselves, as whether they want to create this image of themselves as a kind of a campaigning couple. They're more like John and Yoko actually these days. But I mean, if they want to create that image, then they have to accept that others will have a different interpretation, and they cannot control the news value. They can't control all the photographs. You can't say we can have this photograph out because we've cleared it, but you can't take another photograph. And to come to your point, if they're on a public highway, they're on a public highway.
Yeah.
And anyone can take a photograph on a public highway.
Exactly right. I mean, in the Mail today, Richard Kay's written a piece headlined, "All Pretense is Gone, They Have No Royal Future." Is that the way you see it as well?
Yes, I mean, I think that's the way they see it. I mean, they've clearly distanced themselves entirely. They've moved country. I mean, how more distant can you get from that? But, and as I say, they're entitled to do that. But what they're not entitled to do is to hang on to the bits they like while getting rid of the bits they don't like.
Well, Omid Scobie, the guy that wrote the book I was just talking about, came out apparently yesterday. I heard this on Dan Wootton's show, and said that he believes now that the Meghan and Harry brand is bigger than the royal brand. And you just go, what? What on earth have you been taking or smoking, if that's really what you think? Because I see these two as becoming very old and tired very quickly, and I can't imagine why on earth we would want to be lectured by these two woke individuals. I mean, I don't need to know anything from someone who pays 40 grand a month for a mortgage. Thanks very much indeed.
No, and I don't need to be told, frankly, as someone who's campaigned on the environment for many, many years, for decades actually, going back to the 1980s. I don't need to be told about the damage of climate change from people who are taking private jets all over the place,
right?
Which they do,
and Cadillac Escalades.
Well, absolutely, and they may be flavour of the month in a very small selection of LA and Hollywood, but not necessarily flavour of the month over here. And I think, the fact that they're taking legal action against every single publication they don't like, is not satisfactory. The press has a function in our country, and we have to accept. I've had to accept as a politician over many years that you take the rough with the smooth,
right?
And they cannot control the media in the way they seem to want to control it.
No, quite. And also they've committed the arch criminal act, which in this country is seen as anyway, as having literally no sense of humour about themselves, no sense of the ridiculous or how ridiculous they actually are.
No, well, that's why I say they're a bit like John and Yoko. They're very kind of right on without any reference to the world outside. But I mean, they have burnt their bridges and burnt their boats, whatever the metaphor is. In my book, as you referred to, the paperback, the chapter there is called "The Fab Four Let It Be," because they were called the Fab Four by journalists, William and Kate and Harry and Meghan. And they split up as spectacularly as John and Paul McCartney split up.
They really have. And Kate, of course, came into the royal family very much as a kind of a peasant, if you like. And her family were looked upon very much in a very snobbish way as kind of being a bit down market. Her mother was a BA stewardess and all of that. And, they were involved in some grubby business which involved actually making money for a living. And that was dreadful, actually. But they've become sort of sainted now almost in comparison to this lot.
Well, they have in a way. I mean, Kate has taken the decision to conform to what the traditional royal family want a woman to be, and I don't think that's necessarily right. And I got some sympathy with Meghan here because, women are not simply there to simper and support their husbands. They're not simply there to wear the right colour nail varnish. And some of this 1950s attitude is well out of date. And I think Meghan challenged that, and I think she was right to do that. But they don't like, the royal family don't like strong women with independent minds. We saw that with Diana.
Right. And what about Prince Charles and his connection? I mean, do you believe that they've actually become financially independent from him? Because I don't believe it.
Well, I mean, they haven't been up to now. And quite clearly, a lot of money which has come from the Duchy of Cornwall has gone to Harry and Meghan, as well as to William and Kate. But here's the thing, of course, when we're told that money comes from Charles, if it comes from the Duchy of Cornwall, that's money that comes from us, right? Because the Duchy of Cornwall, in my view, is a public body.
Yes.
And certainly when Prince Charles pays them out of the Duchy of Cornwall, what he does is he offsets the money he gives them against tax. So we're losing out that way as well.
Well, also, I mean, there's all this nonsense of, it's his own money. Well, it's only his own money because he happened to be born into the royal family, and he was handed it because of the fact that he was born into the royal family. There's no other reason. He hasn't actually made any money. Yes, it's a business, and yes, it runs because it runs as a business, but he doesn't pay any tax on it. And quite frankly, if he had to fend for himself out in the real world, he would not be worth millions.
No, well, I mean, look, let's a couple of things about that. First of all, he calls it a private estate. If it's a private estate genuinely, why is it paying no corporation tax?
Right.
He calls it private when it suits him. He calls it public when it suits him. But, each member of the royal family, any senior member of the royal family, it's worth at least £20 million.
Right.
Probably a lot more. Charles, I estimate in my book, it's worth £100 million. Well, where's that money come from? It's come from one of two reasons, either directly or historically. It's come from either taxpayers' money being handed out, or it's come from tax breaks available to the royal family, not available to anybody else.
No.
There's no other money source. They haven't won the lottery, have they?
No, well, exactly right. And they haven't got any sort of ongoing income stream other than the one that they get from what they were handed free at the point of sort of birth, But it's not been a great year for them, Norman. We haven't even mentioned Prince Andrew yet. But, I mean, they talk about Annus Horribilis some years ago. This has got to be the worst one they've ever had, isn't it?
Well, there's worse to come, I think, because the net's slowly closing in on Andrew. I think Harry and Meghan will get more extreme than they even have done so far, and more upsetting to the British public. But for me, the real scandal of the royal family is the finances. They are coining it in at a time when everybody else has been tightening their belts. They are coining it in. Just one statistic, if I may. In 2010, the civil list gave the Queen 7.9 million.
Right.
The equivalent sovereign grant in 2018, to less than 10 years on, was 82.3 million.
Blimey.
Tenfold increase.
That's not bad, is it?
They are absolutely... And we're paying £359 million to refurbish Buckingham Palace. They're paying nothing for that. But yet the Queen is collecting and keeping the income stream from the tickets sold to visitors to go into the palace.
Shouldn't that be being put towards the renovations?
Of course it should.
Call me old-fashioned.
But there you are. nice non-work if you can get it.
Well, exactly right. Blimey. Well, listen, maybe I'll have to try and figure out a way of marrying into the royal family so they can get my hands on some of the filthy lucre. But Norman, thank you very much indeed. Author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. We've just told you what they don't want you to know. His paperback of that particular version of the book has been updated and has just been released. What an extraordinary pair these two are turning into. The Duke and Duchess of Netflix. I must give due credit where it's due, and that was, of course, to one of the callers here at Talk Radio who called Dan Wootton yesterday and said that was what she was going to call him from this point on. It's a fantastic moniker. I think it'll stick. The Duke and Duchess of Netflix. What are they going to do next? I dread to think. Coming up, we're going to talk to Lord Sugar because he's got something to tell us about one of his apprentice business partners, but also we're going to be asking him about the return to work and the return to offices in this country. This is Talk Radio. Welcome back to the Independent Republican, Mike Graham, right here on Talk Radio. Ian Collins, of course, coming up at 1 o'clock. And Dan Wootton coming up with Drive Time at 4. And James Well back at 7. He's going to be in with Ash for the first part of the show. And then Kevin O'Sullivan takes over, of course, as well. We'll be filming with Kevin O'Sullivan later on today for Plank of the Week in the company of not just him, but also Belinda de Lucy, the former Brexit Party MEP. Plenty of contenders, by the way. Let's go to the phones, though, first of all. Richard is in Manchester. Hi, Richard.
Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
Thanks again for taking my call.
Not at all.
I was watching the Commons yesterday, and Kit Malthouse came on.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking very constructively, very nicely, and very seriously about the deaths of the murder of one person and probably another sick by whoever the person is in Birmingham.
Yes.
And out of the blue, from the other side, came a noise, a laugh, laughing his head off.
Oh, yeah.
And it was David Linden of the SNP.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember him?
Not really. No, which one is he?
Oh, he's the guy who Andrew Neil interviewed about the finances when they get this independence that they're going to get.
Oh, yes.
And it was absolutely arrogant. And, of course, Andrew Neil, being as brilliant as you are, made him look very, very small.
He's very good at that.
Probably as smug as Sturgeon. Anyway,
and what was he laughing for?
I don't know. Malthouse lost his temper and shouted over and said, what the dickens are you laughing about? And then lo and behold, when the cameras got back on him, they'd moved him out and put him 3 seats back. That's the type of thing that goes on. They obviously have people on the phones, and he was looking at his phone, and then he started to laugh again, smile, not laugh. And then they must have said, you better get back on the seat, because that is not right, Mike. I don't care what anybody says.
No, that is absolutely the wrong place to do it as well, because, you are, and this is what I always say about any MPs who misbehave, you are given a great privilege to be a member of Parliament in this country, and you should not abuse that, and you should behave well in all situations, whether you're in the House of Parliament or whether you're outside in a pub or on the street. You should not behave like some kind of a lout.
I think if you watched Andrew Neil and him on a 3.5 minute, 4.5 minute snap, on YouTube, I just ripped him apart.
I think I've seen it, but I shall now, after this show, I shall go and look at it again.
Please, if you wouldn't mind, that's absolutely great. But I'm just bringing it out a little bit so that people can listen to what is going on here.
Right.
I think if Sturgeon's going to breed this bitterness with him all the way through, it's going to get really out of hand, and things are going to get really nasty. I mean,
yes.
You had even Ian Blackford the other day. He managed to get an urgent question in after Prime Minister's questions time. I don't know whether you saw that or not.
I did, yeah. We covered it live last week. We'll be doing the same tomorrow.
Yeah. If I'm anybody at 77 years of age, I can see body language, and he was telling porkies. He knew exactly what he'd done, and then he was trying to say, I had nothing to do with this, and he tried to blame everybody else, and he walked out. I haven't seen him for a while, because another multi-millionaire with 6 jobs and getting his money from SNP and so on.
Right.
I mean, it's a bit like the royal family now, isn't it?
Did you see Philip Hammond the other day? He's got about 15 jobs, apparently. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's working for almost every country in the Middle East now.
If you read about him,
it's
true. He wouldn't do anything unless he'd got 10 million in the bank. He told his wife, when I get 10 million in the bank, then I'm going to become an MP. And of course, he knew May very well, so it was natural for him to become the purse
Incredible.
holder.
Absolutely extraordinary. Richard, listen, thanks for alerting me to that. Let's talk to Tim, who's in Colchester in Essex. Hello, Tim.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Morning, sir. What can I do for you?
I wanted to talk about the home working situation.
Yes.
And how it's evolved. I work in IT, and what I've seen over the years is more and more focus on people working from home. The problem has been a lot of greedy landlords have been putting rent up, where it can cost anything from $450 to $4,500 per person to have somebody sat in an office. That's per month.
Right. And so what's that costed at? Is that because of the square footage, or how do you work that out?
Square footage, insurance, people getting to work, electricity, the servers on site, the whole the computer on a desk and everything else. All those costs swallowed up. Places like in the middle of London, they can be up to $4,500 for some of the trading places in London.
Sure.
And what has happened, if you look at the driver behind IT, the evolution of software, it has been more and more focused on people working from home. This has been inevitable. There was a great big plan, and I sit on a lot of stuff with Microsoft and Apple. It's been a great plan over the next 10 years to get more people working from home. What has happened with COVID, we have just done 10 years of evolution in natural working abilities in the space of about 4 or 5 months.
Yes, but it's not necessarily a success, though, is it? I mean, I keep hearing from people, for example, who say to me, if it's all as efficient as if they were working from an office, why do all of these customer helplines say, please bear with us while we have to deal with delays because many of our people are working from home?
The problem is, because this was going to be an evolution over the next 10 years, we've had to deliver it in 4 months, there are going to be teething issues. It's inevitable. You can't avoid
Well,
that.
I'm sorry. I don't expect there to be teething issues when I'm calling my bank, because I have a limited amount of time on my hands, and I don't expect to have to be put on hold for an hour just because they all want to work from home. That's not acceptable to me.
It's because the technology hasn't been ready.
Yeah, but I don't care what the reason is. All I'm saying is that it's not acceptable. If you're the customer and you are in some way inconvenienced and put off by this because of the fact that people want to work from home, that's not good enough, is it? You're running a business.
It isn't. But you can blame COVID for that entirely. I mean, because everybody was forced to shut the office, we've had to make a lot of changes to get people working from home. The systems weren't there. The bandwidth, the network wasn't there. Internet companies have been under strain. Netflix had to drop its quality down because the whole bandwidth within the UK because we didn't have fibre to people's properties and things. We didn't have the infrastructure there to cope with it. Companies have been out. We've been out getting more scope of systems in place. It's a lot better now, you must admit. It's a lot better now.
Well, I'm not hearing that it's any better than it was. I mean, obviously, in the first few weeks, it was the entire sort of country was shut down, so it didn't really apply. But I'm talking about now that we're coming out of it, and we need to come out of it because we need to get the economy going again. You know, the arguments for people staying where they are, I think, are diminishing, and the arguments for them coming back into office space are increasing.
The problem is I can't personally see it with all the money that companies have now invested in IT equipment for people to work from home. That's not going to be wasted. When you weigh up the cost, and a lot of companies have seen productivity go up by 16% on average.
Well, I keep hearing these figures, but I don't know how you measure that. I really don't, because if you're working on a call and you're less efficient, how is your productivity going up?
I guess in certain industries it might be affected. In different industries, you might be seeing productivity going down if it's a call centre based things. Yeah, what we've got to do is work smart. We've got to look at what we've got now, where it's been beneficial. There will be people working from home. Where it hasn't been, people probably will return to the office. Is not going to be what it was before. Companies like Pret, who are here making so many thousand people redundant, they need to evolve with this. It's been a long time coming.
Well, it's all very well you saying they need to evolve with it, but you're talking about people's jobs. You know, maybe you need to evolve and get out of the job you're in because somebody thinks you should. That's not really the great attitude to have in a supposedly modern society, is it?
Well, I'm not saying that they need to get out of their jobs.
Well, you are. You're just saying they have to suck it up, basically.
No, what I'm basically saying is Pret, not the people in the jobs, Pret as a company needs to evolve. Home delivery of sandwiches. Let's look at the market from there. You know, get some vans.
Have you seen the state of the roads? Have you seen the state of the roads? Everybody's getting everything home delivered, right? Nobody's actually thought about the fact that we don't have the bandwidth on the roads to take all the vans that bring all the stuff to you, sitting in your cosy little room with your pajamas on.
Well, I guess there is some issues there, but I mean,
some issues. Yeah.
I've seen the roads being quite clear. I mean,
well, you should try driving into London once in a while.
Then get some push bikes. You know, there is always a solution.
Oh, right. So somebody's going to bring you the double bed you ordered on the back of a push bike.
No, I'm not talking about a double bed. I'm talking companies like Pret. Let's double beds that could be delivered by vans the same as they normally could be. But, you know, things like Pret.
Yeah, but all I'm saying to you, Tim, is, look, I understand that there are lots of people who think the way you do, and you'd like this kind of idyllic new world where everybody sits at home and doesn't talk to anybody apart from virtually on some kind of FaceTime device. But that is not society, and that is a dangerous road to go down, in my view. But listen, stay listening, keep coming on to me and talking to me, because I want to talk about this for a long time until it gets fixed, and it needs to get fixed. Tim, I'm sure, has a lot of people that agree with him. I don't agree with him. I think it's a dangerous road to go down. It's a dangerous place to find yourself in, and I think it will only lead to more weirdness in society, quite frankly. Lots more to do, lots more to come over the course of the next hour, of course. We're here till 1 o'clock. The news is next.
Talk Radio.
Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk to Olivia Utley, Deputy Leader Writer at The Sun. She's done a piece today about why is it that the young are getting blamed for the spike in coronavirus. My argument will be, actually, I don't think the spike in coronavirus is too much to worry about. She may disagree with that. We'll find out in a moment what's going on. We'll be doing some homeschooling as well about the devolved government, because a lot of people are asking me, how is it possible for Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland to have different health policy than England? Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, so we'll get to the bottom of that as well. We'll take some of your calls, 0344 499 1000 if you need to get on. We're talking Brexit, we're talking about getting back to work in offices as well. Right now, though, let's get some news headlines. Here's Ross Powell.
Across the UK, online and on DAB. Talk Radio on the Hour Headlines.
Thanks, Mike. On the way at noon, government admits concern over rise in COVID cases. Andrew Lloyd Webber calls for parliamentary help to save theatres, and the South East feels the effects of an earthquake.
Talk Radio News.
The Health Secretary says everyone must abide by the pandemic restrictions as ministers warn a rise in cases is concerning. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer says the public has relaxed too much. Caerphilly is the latest area to impose greater restrictions on movement, with the Welsh Government saying those measures will be in place for weeks to come. But Matt Hancock's told MPs a second peak isn't inevitable.
It depends on the actions that all of us take. Of course, in government we're concerned about this and we keep all options open. But everybody's got a part to play.
This comes as the head of the NHS's Test and Trace programme has offered a heartfelt apology because of problems with COVID testing. Sarah Jane Marsh says labs are currently overstretched. Andrew Lloyd Webber's told senior MPs that theatres and music venues can't last much longer if lockdown restrictions on venues continue. He wants a date set for theatres to open and without social distancing. He's told a committee investigating the sector's economic plight the dangers the industry faces.
We really can't go on much more. We're bumping up against our bank covenants and all of these things because, as I say, theatre is an incredibly labour-intensive business.
A crucial few days for Brexit talks is beginning, with the UK's chief negotiator calling it a make-or-break week. Lord Frost is calling for more realism from Brussels. Tory MP Peter Bone, who's also part of the future relationship with the EU Select Committee, told Talk Radio there's absolutely will be a deal by the October 15th deadline.
The EU need a deal more than us. They send £100 billion worth more goods to us than we do to them. It's in everyone's interest. It will be done.
And the British Geological Survey is investigating reports of an earthquake in the Bedfordshire area. It's thought to have happened at around 8:45 this morning, with an initial investigation saying it was a magnitude 3.3 at a depth of 10 kilometres. People across parts of the home counties have reported feeling it.
Talk Radio National Weather.
Mainly dry across England and Wales through the afternoon. There will be some rain along parts of the northwest coast. We'll also see some heavy downpours across the Scottish Highlands, highs of 23 in the southeast.
Talk Radio. Across the UK, online, on DAB and on your smart speaker. The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. You know what to do. This is the place where we hear from you because we care what you think, and you can join the home of common sense by simply ringing this number 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about going back to work in offices. That's a constant refrain from me. I'm being accused of being a Luddite now by some of you out there saying, why don't you change with the times? Well, I don't want to change with the times. I don't want London to become an absolute and utter dead zone, which is what it is right now. We're going to talk to Olivia Utley as well coming up. She's deputy leader writer at The Sun, has written a piece today in defence of young people, but also warning them that they mustn't do anything that might endanger the outbreak of COVID, the second wave of COVID, and possibly, indeed, as Matt Hancock would say, basically harming your granny. Trying to stop young people from being quite so carefree about the disease, because it would appear that the young, particularly those between the ages of about 17 and 24, are getting blamed for not taking COVID seriously enough. 0344 499 1000. A bit of homeschooling coming up as well. More of your calls. You're listening to me, Mike Graham, right here on the fastest growing radio station on the planet. It is, of course, Talk Radio.
Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio.
Now, I'm delighted to say that because we are moving with the times, we're actually allowing people to come back into the studio. And Olivia Utley sits before me here in our brand new studio, high above the Thames. Olivia, welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham.
Hello.
Thank you for coming in. You've got an interesting piece in the paper this morning because 20-somethings are all getting the blame, it would seem, apparently now, as they did in Spain, for this kind of spike in the coronavirus at the moment. My argument about it really, though, is that the spike might be there, but until we find out that it's actually harming people, which it doesn't appear to be doing, does it matter?
Well, yeah, I think that there's an argument that maybe it doesn't only not matter, but it could actually be quite good. It could be that lots and lots of young people who don't get very many symptoms get ill with it, get very slightly ill with it, and that brings up the immunity rate, and we could get to that tabooed phrase, herd immunity.
Right.
The only issue is that in France and in Spain, it does seem to look as though this spike in young people getting it is corresponding to a spike in deaths among the elderly and vulnerable.
Right.
So I massively sympathise with, I mean, I am quite young myself, but I massively sympathise with people younger than me even, whose year has just been totally ruined by this. And like, it's one thing if you're just having to stay working from home for 6 months, but if you were planning to do your A-levels, go on an amazing summer holiday and then start university, start freshers week, blah, 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 then it must be awful having to go through this. So I do completely see why they want to just let their hair down and go to a rave. But I'm just sort of, in the Sun today, I'm just kind of urging just a word of caution that hopefully it won't matter at all. You could be quite right that it won't matter at all, and then it might even be a good thing. But there is just this chance that it will correspond with a spike in deaths, and that's just the last thing we need. We don't need another lockdown.
No, I don't think we do. But my worry about having another lockdown as well is that if we were to have one, nobody would actually go along with it, because we're already seeing a kind of split in society, as far as I'm concerned. Having just had that conversation with a guy before the news there about working from home, lots of people are now saying, oh, but, you know, why should we we come back to work? Basically, working from home is better. We spend more quality time with our families. We have better life-work balance, and we don't have to commute anymore. But to me, that's a very dangerous kind of road to go down, because you're basically creating a new society, which isn't really a society at all. It's full of, I think Neil Oliver said to me the other week, it's like having a load of battery chickens all just sitting at home. You get up, you have some food, you sit down, you do your work, you don't go anywhere, you don't meet anyone, you don't interact with anyone, there's no sociability going on. And if you are a young person who's only just got a job, for example, you might not have ever met anyone you work with.
Absolutely. And I think you learn just so much from being around people in the office. And there are questions that you don't want to put on an email because you feel a bit silly because you don't know something, but you can easily just grab the person next to you and just check something. I find it really weird talking to people who started work during this pandemic and literally, as you say, haven't met the people they work with, don't go out for a drink after work, etc. I think probably what's quite worrying is that the type of people who are very sociable anyway, are going to meet lots of people throughout their careers, are very good at networking, are the ones desperate to go back to the office. They probably don't particularly need to. It's the people who really want to just stay at home because they'd rather just curl up in their own little room and do their own little thing, who probably would really benefit from being in an office.
And I worry about that, because then they're not only not going out to an office, but most people's social lives revolve around work, whether you like it or not, whether you're a police officer, whether you're a fireman, whether you're a nurse, and these are all people who've been working throughout. People who work in supermarkets, they didn't go, oh, you can't work from home, please. It'd be much better for my work-life balance. Well, yeah, great, but unfortunately it wouldn't be any good for the people that you're actually supposed to be serving. And as I've said, people are complaining to me that they can't get any answers out of any of these call centres because they haven't got anybody with them that they can ask a question to. They have to put the phone down and call somebody else.
Yeah, so that just seems completely ridiculous. Yeah, I think that everyone should be getting back to offices quickly. I also think that it's of course, not having people in offices will destroy city centres, all the sandwich shops and cleaners, all the transport staff who depend on city centres being alive. But also I think it'll ruin people's lives, just the people who are working at home, because, well, personally, I find that if I don't go out for a few days or a week or something, or just pop to the shops or whatever, then I stop being as sociable. When someone says, do you want to go for a drink? I think, oh God, do I want to go for a drink? And I overthink it.
Exactly. Well, I was wondering when I first read your piece this morning, I got a bit irritable because I was out for dinner last night, and my first reading of it, I thought, what are you telling me I can't go out for dinner now? Because you're kind of urging youngsters not to do anything too reckless.
Oh, yeah, too reckless. I don't
go to raves anymore. I'm too old for that.
I went to the pub last night. I've been using Eat Out. I used Eat Out to help out a lot during August. Definitely we should all be doing all of that sort of stuff, and of course we need to keep the economy going, and I'm a huge fan of getting out, meeting people, doing everything. It's just a couple of these stories that you hear of things like raves, which do seem to be kind of COVID havens, and it's just not really necessary. I just think there are so many other ways for young people to socialise, and just slightly more responsible ways of doing it. And I just think there's I'm totally in the camp of let's get the economy going, let's get anything, but just a hint of caution.
Yes, because I think most of us have changed the way that we operate in public. If I walk down the road, I tend to make sure I'm not walking too close to anybody. If I'm in a bar, I make sure that I'm not standing too near anyone. All of those things you never thought about.
Absolutely, and I think that actually most people, anyone who sort of connects to the news and reading about coronavirus every day, is doing that all the time, of course. But I think quite a lot of part of the problem might be that 17 to 21-year-olds don't tend to be completely tuned into the news all the time. So, strange though it sounds, I think it's possible in some parts of the country to sort of forget that this is an issue at all.
Right.
So basically what I'm trying to do is just kind of remind people that it is still a thing, and that there are different ways of socialising that aren't illegal raves.
What was interesting to me was I got on a train. I don't use the tube that much, but I'm beginning to use it a bit more now, but it's beginning to get a little bit more busy. I got on it last night at about 6:15, and everyone on the train was wearing a mask. When I got back onto it at 11:30, when I was going home, nobody was wearing a mask. They were all just sitting there chatting away. And I don't know whether that's in any way a factor of them being out or having had a drink or whatever it is, but there's clearly two. They had masks, but they just weren't wearing them. So I think people are kind of using and abusing the system as and when they feel like it, really.
Yeah, exactly. And that obviously doesn't really work.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether it does. That's the thing, because I mean, we were told, were we not, when the beaches were mobbed? You remember we went to Bournemouth Beach, and there wasn't really a spike as a result of that. We were told because of all the marching that was going on with Black Lives Matter in the summer that would cause a big problem. It didn't seem to do so. But there are areas of the country that seem to be getting these little spikes. But again, you know, in Scotland, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine who runs nightclubs up there. You're not allowed to play music in a pub because they're worried that people might start singing, and which will give more of a sort of viral load away if you've got the disease. And it's very weird. And he was saying, look, what we need to do is reopen the nightclubs, because we can manage that, we can regulate it, we can make sure that everybody's doing the right thing, as opposed to kids going on these illegal raves, which they'll do anyway because they want to hear some music and have a dance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good point, actually, that if there have got to be other ways for these kids to socialise, because it must be just awful. Like, imagine being stuck at home with your parents for 7 months straight without seeing your friends if you're 20, 21. They're called socially starved. That's the phrase I keep hearing, and I think that must be completely true. So, yeah, I think if adults think of sensible ways for them to socialise, then they won't be going to these raves, which might genuinely end up with a spike. So
I know, and like you were saying in your piece about people who don't live together but are boyfriend and girlfriend, or girlfriend and girlfriend, and had to kind of not see each other for weeks on end, or maybe months on end, because they couldn't mingle with another household.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't even considered this. I've got a friend with a younger sister. She's 18, and she met her boyfriend at school last October, and they fell in love, and it's this wonderful, new romance, first love. And then they just weren't allowed to see each other for 7 months, and now they're going off to different universities, and it just sounds a bit miserable.
It's got much of a future, that particular relationship,
exactly.
Is it? But that's the other problem. I mean, my kids go back to school this week. One of them who's still in sort of year 9, he's going to have to wear a mask when he leaves the classroom that he's sitting in order to walk down a corridor. Now, I was told right at the beginning, as we all were, that the only way to get this virus was to be within a metre of someone who has it for more than 15 minutes. Now, if you're walking past people in a corridor, I don't see how that's happening, and I don't see why they need to wear a mask. And then I read about a school in Buckinghamshire where the headmaster's asking them to wear a different mask every time they do it. So they need 6 masks a day. And you're kind of going, the world's actually gone mad here, and we're beginning to accept this kind of stuff, like the way that Matt Hancock talks about, don't harm your granny. I mean, there's some very odd stuff going on out there.
Yeah, I mean, some of the mask things in schools, I can't see that that's going to work. I mean, kids will just 6 masks a day. They'll just take them off, leave them on the floor. There'll be dirty masks everywhere. People will think, I don't have a mask to get into my lesson. I'll just pick up this old one and put it on.
Well, there's a great cartoon of a kid coming home, and the father says to him, that's not the mask I gave you this morning. No, I swapped it with my friend Alan.
Yes,
and that's the kind of stuff they'll do, because I liked his better than mine. I mean, I think while we have to be careful, there's also a need for us to be not ridiculously careful, and not to frighten kids, I think, and frighten young people. And I think a lot of younger people are just saying, well, we don't really think it's going to do us any harm, so we're not going to be that bothered.
Yeah, and I really do totally sympathise with that. All I'm saying today is just like a little note of caution, because there are so many other ways to socialise, and it would just be such a nightmare if we had another lockdown. That's the main reason. I mean, it's no fun trying to get a job during a recession, and the longer this virus is circulating, the more we see these spikes, the more the government's going to, even if it's unnecessary that the government's doing it, the government will still impose more restrictions, and the recession will carry on. So in the end, going to a rave probably isn't worth it, but by all means, go to the pub, socially distance with your mates, and have some drinks.
But that's the thing. I mean, I think we heard today they're talking about the possibility of limiting the number. I was talking to Julie Hartley-Brewer this morning about limiting the number of people that you're allowed to mingle with from a different household, and neither one of us could actually remember what the number is. I mean, I don't know, and apparently it was 30.
It was 30. I didn't know that.
I thought that was out. I mean, who's got 30 people in their house? I mean, what are you doing? I mean, that's more like a business than a house, it seems to me. I mean, I've never had a dinner party for 30 people. What are you talking about? So, I mean, I think people are quite confused as well.
Confused,
I mean, as you say, I mean, you and I are in the news business, so we're supposed to know. And we don't know. So what chance has anybody else got? I mean, goodness gracious. Well, anyway, listen, don't go to any raves. Olivia Utley's told you not to. But do go and enjoy yourselves and spend some money, for God's sake, wherever you are. So I think we're going to need to get out of this somehow. But thank you very much for stopping by. We'll see you again soon. This is Talk Radio, of course. We'll take some calls on that, because if you are somebody who's ever been to a rave in the last month or so, I'd love to know why you think that's a good idea. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk Radio.
Talk Radio. The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. Here's one from Metal who says, disappointed there's no Meghan impression yet. Come on, Mike. That's from Seb in Newcastle. Well, listen, Seb. All right, just for you. Harry, do you have to pay them that money back? £2.4 million. Think of how many bathrooms we could buy for that. £2.4 million. Don't give it to them, Harry. Give it to me. Give it to me. I want to go to Rodeo Drive. Let's talk to Richard in Swindon. Hello, Richard.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Very well, sir. What can I do for you?
Good. Bit of a double whammy for you. My daughter's been working and living in Thailand for a year now.
Okay.
Where they've had no COVID since end of May, I believe.
You know, it's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of Southeast Asian countries haven't fared too badly with this thing.
I know, maybe the weather, who knows? But the point is, when she comes back to the UK, she's got a quarantine for 14 days, so make that one out as you can. Sort of more importantly, the working from home issue. She's always worked in the city before she lived in Thailand.
Right.
She's had 3 interviews, all online, I guess.
Right.
She's got a second interview working in recruitment,
Right.
all online. And when she gets the job, it'll be based at home.
Wow. And have they said that permanently?
Well, they've not said permanently, but that's the indication at the moment. But it doesn't bode too well for the future. And I guess she's got a strong CV, so she's probably okay getting a job. But God knows how younger people who are just getting into the workplace are going to survive trying to work.
Well, you know, imagine a situation where you say you get a job, but you've never. I mean, she might even be in this boat. She might not mind, but you're basically working with people you've never met.
Well, yeah, exactly. So it's going to be difficult for the younger ones. So her CV's okay, and she's got experience. But if you haven't got experience, how do you learn from people? I just think it's
really bad. I just think it's such a bad idea that, you know, okay, listen, I understand it might be a temporary thing, but if it becomes a permanent thing, I think it's really dangerous for the economy and for the country.
Well, that's the worry. It will become a permanent thing, and I don't see an end to it. I mean, I worked in the city. I've worked from home for 30 years, so I've kind of got used to that world being in sales.
Right.
But it's not as easy as people think.
No, it really isn't. And not everybody can work from home because, let's face it, a lot of particularly young people, they live in flat shares or they share in a house or something like that. Sometimes they don't really have any individual space apart from a little bedroom.
Oh, you've got a young family, which I remember having, you know, kids screaming, you're trying to do work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster, I reckon. But Richard Risson, great call. Thanks very much indeed. That is ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, Thailand, a place where there's hardly any COVID, but you have to quarantine when you come home. Madness. Martin is in Farnborough. Hello, Martin.
Good afternoon to you, Mike.
Afternoon. What can I do for you?
Well, thank you for taking my call, and secondly, thank you for your Meghan impersonation. I love it. I love it.
I mean, a lot of people now say to me when they see her that they imagine that's how she speaks. Which is great. I think it's not that far off, actually.
No, it's wonderful. It's about the future of this couple. I think there's a very well-crafted plan here, and it's been planned for a very long time. If you noticed, as time went on, Meghan seemed to be more and more put out that she wasn't front row and that she had to play second fiddle.
She clearly expected that she was going to be the queen of the castle, didn't she?
Absolutely. And, of course, being a second-rate American actress, she thought she was going to get the starring role.
Right.
And obviously she either didn't want to or didn't understand that there is a strict protocol within the royal family.
Right. You'd think Harry might have explained that to her, wouldn't you?
I think Harry didn't think with his brains, he thought with his organ.
Yes, I think you may well be right about that.
But this business of Netflix and that, and paying back the money, I think this is a long-term program whereby Archie and Harry will become American citizens. Because
well, he's going to have to be careful with that, though, because one of the things apparently that he wanted to avoid was paying tax in America, because he's got a lot of money, and if he becomes an American citizen, he suddenly becomes subject to the Inland Revenue.
Well, I think there's obviously ways around it. She's obviously got some very good accountants.
Yeah, but he'd still have to pay tax, which is not something he's ever done. He doesn't know how to do it. You know, this is a guy who thinks he doesn't have to pay tax because he's so privileged.
Well, life's going to catch up with him, and he's going to have to come and live in the real world, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly right.
I honestly feel that him and her should lose their titles because they're an absolute insult to the royal family.
Yes, I agree. I think we should all just collectively agree to call them the Duke and Duchess of Netflix.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That suits them down to the ground.
and then they can move on to Disney.
Yeah, exactly.
But I really think she has got a long-term plan, and I definitely feel Archie's in that plan to become an American citizen.
I feel pretty sorry for poor old Archie, to be honest.
I feel sorry for the kid because he's going to be disenfranchised from his British family, and I can see him becoming a political tool of Meghan. And I think that's another reason why she had to see herself getting out, was because she had to keep quiet. And obviously she's extremely anti-Trump, and I love the world and I'm going to teach you how to live well from my multi-million-pound house.
It's true. Yeah. Well, be kind. Listen, great call, Martin. Thank you very much. I've got to move on. Just got Marty to talk to, who's in Melbourne, in Australia. Hello, Marty.
Yeah, hi Mike, how you doing, mate?
Very well, mate. Very nice to hear from that sunny part of the world. How's the lockdown going?
Yeah, it's not going too well, mate. I'd like to get away from the political issue of it all and just highlight that just alone today, mate, I had 2 ambulances on my street, and they were suicides, mate.
Really? Goodness me.
Yeah, mate.
Because you've got a massive curfew in place and everything, right?
Yeah, it's really crazy, mate. And look, I'm not going to say I'm any type of data scientist to understand, where we know where we're going or what's happening in regards to the data, but I can see the human cost around me, mate, and it's really depressing, mate.
I bet.
We're in a really bad situation, mate. I mean, we're in 23-hour lockdown. We've been here basically, for all intents and purposes, I mean, we've been here for 6 months, mate, and we're not given any real hope from our Premier at the moment. Or, I don't want to get political with it, mate. I just want to highlight that and I don't think it gets highlighted enough, the mental health aspect of it all, mate. We know that people are dying from COVID, and it's a specific demographic. We know it's affecting the elderly, but apart from that, it's got a knock-on effect when it's people are losing their businesses, losing their jobs, and they're stuck inside 23 hours a day, by the way, because we have the strictest lockdowns in the world at the moment.
It's incredible what they do in Australia. I mean, I know somebody who went back there for having been sent away from the Middle East for work and did proper quarantine, not the way we do it, but literally locked in a hotel room, not allowed out for 14 days, not even for a walk,
Yeah, that's the last of our concerns. I mean, they're relying on data from what they call a supercomputer over here, and the data that's coming out from it, they've not shown us that how the algorithms are made up, and the human cost on it is much bigger than just people dying from COVID.
And there's quite a few people as well now, Marty, who are kind of railing against it, aren't there?
Yeah, well, this is what concerns me, Michael, and I really hope you'd support me on this. But we had a journalist. The fact that there's been people getting arrested on Facebook for thought police kind of going on at the moment. People getting arrested at their homes for posting stuff on Facebook.
I saw that
on the weekend. We had a reporter. His name is Avi Yameni. And he was arrested on the weekend on the lockdown protest, but he was there with a certificate saying that he was there with the press, and the police still arrested him. And that really concerns me, is that the press are being arrested. And I don't really care what your political leanings are. I do not believe that the press should be getting arrested. I mean, that's really scary.
Yeah, that really is awful. That's terrible. Well, listen, we'll look into that. We've got Helen Dale coming up this week, and we'll talk to her about that. Marty, listen, really appreciate your call. You can hear in his voice the kind of distress, the absolute and utter incredulity of the situation. He said we've pretty much been locked down for 6 months, or the best part of it, and a 23-hour lockdown, which means you may be allowed out for an hour a day. Is that right? There's a curfew, which means you can't go out after 8 o'clock at night. You're not allowed to mix with anybody. I mean, I think if they tried that here, it just would not work. People wouldn't do it. I really don't think they would. Tell us about it. 0344 499 1000. Homeschooling coming up. We're going to be talking about devolution and how it actually works. Of course, the Brexit talks are ongoing. Of course, we'll be here tomorrow with Prime Minister's questions. Let's hope with Charlotte Ivers that it's better than it was last week, because it's pretty disappointing, to be fair, between Secure, the forensic Starmer, and Boris Johnson, who seemed particularly testy last week. I don't know whether he wasn't feeling up to it, but we'll see. Coming up right now, let's get some news headlines with Ross Powell.
Talk Radio, half-hour headlines.
Ministers and government scientists admit they're worried about an upward trend in positive coronavirus cases. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, says the public have relaxed too much, while the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, admits he's concerned after the UK recorded just under 3,000 new cases on both Sunday and Monday. Mr Jenrick has told Talk Radio now is the time to double down on the basic tactics in fighting the virus.
We all need to follow the guidance, the simple things in our daily lives, like washing our hands, wearing masks, staying socially distanced. This is a cautionary tale, really, that if we don't want to see a return to wider restrictions, we've got to be very careful, particularly younger people.
This comes as Wales Health Minister says a local lockdown in Caerphilly will not be lifted until October at the earliest. Vaughan Gething insists a recent increase in cases will become out of control if it's left unaddressed. From 6 o'clock this evening, people won't be allowed to enter or leave Caerphilly without a reasonable excuse. The head of the NHS's Test and Trace programme has offered her heartfelt apologies to anyone who isn't currently able to get a COVID test. Sarah Jane Marsh says the problem centres around laboratories being used to process results being overstretched. Andrew Lloyd Webber says he is confident the air inside his theatres is cleaner than it is outside, as he calls for a reopening of the sector. He's been trialling measures at the London Palladium that could allow the theatre business to return. He's told the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee the industry won't survive much longer.
Putting on a show now is almost a labour of love. I mean, very, very few shows really, really hit the jackpot in the way that, say, a Hamilton or a Lion King or a Phantom of the Opera do.
And people across the southeast have felt the effects of an earthquake this morning. The British Geological Survey has said the tremor, measuring a magnitude of 3.3, centred around the town of Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire. People in the surrounding towns of Luton and Milton Keynes have also reported tables wobbling and sofas shifting across living rooms when the quake struck at around 8:45. Mainly dry across England and Wales through the afternoon, although there will be some rain along parts of the northwest coast. We'll also see some heavy downpours across Scottish Highlands, highs of 23 in the southeast.
Across the UK, online, on DAB and on your smart speaker. Late Night with Christo Fufas on Talk Radio.
Big topics, big opinions, big conversations and a place to have your say. So phone Christo and let's put the world to rights.
Late Night with Christo Fufas. Weeknights from 10 on Talk Radio. Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio. The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, right here on Talk Radio. We had some interesting tweets earlier on from earthquakes. This is from Tony. Apparently he says most earthquakes feel like a lorry rumbling past and just get ignored. Well, do you know, I've actually covered quite a lot of earthquake stories in this country, and there are more earthquakes in this country than you would ever know. They happen quite often and all the time throughout the course of the year. Most of them, though, are so small that you don't really notice. We've had the fracking debate, of course, where people have said, oh, it's the fracking that's causing the earthquakes. Nobody can really prove that, but there certainly is an argument to be made that every sort of so often, certainly every 6 months or so, there's a reasonably powerful earthquake that you can actually feel if you happen to be near it. And today, the earthquake hit Bedfordshire, and we've spoken to a few people and got some great texts from people who have experienced it. But now it's time for our homeschooling. So let's talk about a political earthquake that took place under Tony Blair's guidance when devolution was basically granted back at the end of the last century to Wales, to Scotland and to Northern Ireland. Because at the moment, people are asking me quite a lot of questions about the way devolution works, because it's not always that straightforward to figure it out. Wales has an assembly, Scotland has a parliament, Northern Ireland has an assembly as well, which are slightly less powerful. But let's find out from a proper expert rather than me, Jack Sheldon, researcher in politics at the University of Cambridge, just how it's possible that the laws of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland can be kind of different in different parts of different countries. Jack, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mike, and thanks so much for having me on. So, what we call devolution is a set of arrangements that, as you said, were introduced under Tony Blair's government in the late 1990s. And the whole point was to enable Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to do things differently from Westminster if they wanted to, around particularly public services like health and education are areas which are devolved. Meanwhile, some other powers continue to remain at Westminster across the UK, so running the economy as a whole, for example. And as we've seen during the course of the coronavirus pandemic, this has meant that the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have been able to do things a little bit differently in some areas. So although we initially saw the different parts of the UK go into lockdown together, we've come out of lockdown at different speeds, and there are some important differences in regulations around quarantine rules, the number of households that can meet together, for example.
I mean, I'm wondering as well whether, and I know this is not so much of an academic question, maybe more of a political one, whether what's been going on in the last few weeks and months has sort of highlighted the problem with devolution as far as Westminster is concerned, because what you seem to have is rival kind of political parties vying for who can do something first and who can do something better. And you know, Nicola Sturgeon's obviously been a very sort of, you know, quite vicious critic at times of the government in Westminster, as has the First Minister of Wales. And so it's for me, it's no longer just an administrative nicety that these countries have got the right to sort of self-determination in various different aspects, but it's almost become more of a political situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting consequence of devolution, which was perhaps unforeseen back in the 90s.
Right.
When devolution was introduced, it was at a time when Labour was in a very strong position right across the country, not only at Westminster, but in Scotland and Wales as well. And that's not so much the case now. In fact, for some years now, we've had the pro-independence Scottish National Party as the dominant force in Scottish politics, while Labour's been leading the Welsh government. Northern Ireland is run by a power-sharing coalition. I think it's certainly true that that's given a platform that before devolution, the leader of the Scottish National Party wouldn't have had to present themselves with all the legitimacy and trappings of office of being the leader of a devolved government, to criticise what Boris Johnson's doing, but also to carve out her own route. I mean, to some extent, of course, that is a feature rather than a bug of devolution. If you're saying that an element of self-determination is to be given to Scotland and Wales, that did always imply the possibility that that might be run by a different party from that in London, and that might lead to tensions and to moving in a different direction. But of course, with all the tensions that have already been building up over the last few years around Brexit, for example, the level of support for Scottish independence, which has remained consistently around the 50% mark since the referendum in 2016. Clearly, this is a very fraught situation at the moment, completely different from when devolution was first introduced.
Well, it really is, because interestingly, and I used to kind of know Tony Blair back in those days, his reasoning for devolution was to try and quell this kind of nationalist fervour that was going on in Scotland and in Wales. And I don't think he could have foreseen that the Labour Party would just collapse completely, because they just didn't look after their constituents in Scotland. And also, I don't think they were helped by the voting system, which of course is not first past the post. It's far more wide ranging than that. And because of the way that people can vote for parties, then they will get a much bigger share of the vote and a share of the seats. Proportional representation works for the SNP.
It certainly worked for them. So when the SNP first came into government in 2007, it was as a minority government through proportional representation at a time when Labour certainly still would have been dominant under first past the post. I think that since then, what we've seen is, of course, that the SNP have over time been able to convert the stronger footholds that they initially got in the Scottish Parliament through the proportional representation system into a situation where they are now clearly the dominant party in Scotland, even under first past the post for Westminster elections. Of course, we now have the SNP holding the vast majority of the Scottish parliamentary seats. So it is definitely a different situation. And yeah, the Labour Party's position in Scotland is one of the biggest changes over the past 20 years that's completely changed how we think about devolution.
And is it the case now that there's no going back, as it were? When we see, for example, different quarantining arrangements being made in Scotland and Wales, there's no way for Westminster's government to kind of overrule that?
No, they couldn't overrule that. I mean, I suppose in theory they could pass some new legislation at the centre to prevent that, but that would be extraordinarily controversial. And of course, in the early days of the pandemic, you might remember that when we went into lockdown, we did have Boris Johnson meeting with Nicola Sturgeon, with Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, and with the First Minister and Deputy First Minister for Northern Ireland, and agreeing to pursue almost identical regulations and synchronising announcements around going into lockdown, for example. But clearly over time...
That didn't last.
No, I mean, over time, the immediate urgency of the situation wore off, and perhaps, those underlying political and practical incentives for the governments in Scotland and Wales in particular to pursue their own courses came back into the open. I mean, we do have quite fundamental differences of principle on a lot of issues, and it's probably fair to say that the leaders of the governments in Scotland and Wales don't trust Boris Johnson and his government very much, and there's probably mutual feeling, especially from Boris Johnson towards the Scottish government.
Yes, true. And yet they still share quite a lot of information. And I mean, the First Minister, certainly in Scotland, is allowed to attend COBRA meetings and that kind of thing. Why was it decided that only Scotland could have a parliament, though, where Wales and Northern Ireland just got an assembly?
Well, back in the 1990s, it seemed that support for devolution was highest in Scotland, and we saw that in the referendum. Then Scotland voted quite comfortably to establish a Scottish Parliament. In Wales, it was a much narrower thing. Wales had already rejected devolution back in the 1970s by an 80% margin, and when the referendum was held in 1998, it was by just a tiny margin over 50% that they voted in favour. But actually, over time, the powers of what was the Welsh Assembly have started to increase and are now much more similar to the Scottish Parliament than they were originally. Recently, it has changed its official name, so it's now known as Senedd Cymru in Welsh, or Welsh Parliament in English. So we do now have that equivalence between Scotland and Wales that wasn't there to begin with.
Right. And they've also got the powers in Scotland, certainly, to raise taxes on certain issues, but they don't choose to use all of those, interestingly enough, despite the fact that they could. They don't yet have that, though, I don't think, in Wales and Ireland, right? Yeah, no, that's true. So these extra taxation powers for Scotland were introduced particularly after the 2014 referendum. A commission of the different parties met together and agreed on a new host of powers that were transferred under the Scotland Act 2016. You're right that so far the use of these has been fairly limited. I think that the powers mostly allowed Scotland to increase taxes, and perhaps there's a feeling that politically to raise taxes above what they were elsewhere in the UK would be a difficult thing to sell. But it's true that, that these powers, and also in relation to welfare, for example, aren't always used to the extent that you might imagine, even though they're now there. No, of course. And the age restriction on voting, they can change as well, can't they? But presumably just for their own elections rather than national ones. Yes, so that's quite a recent development. So now in both Scotland and Wales, votes at 16 has been introduced. Of course, we first saw in the UK votes at 16 in the Scottish independence referendum in 2014. And yes, that applies only to the devolved elections. So for general elections, the national franchise of 18 still applies, but we will see votes at 16 in Scotland. Of course, that's an interesting point because we know that support for independence and for the SNP is greatest among younger age groups, but probably the size of the 16 to 18 age group means that that's not going to be the fundamentally important factor in determining the future. No, of course. And finally, Jack, I appreciate your time. Will there be, do you think, in this Parliament another Scottish referendum? Because again, the Scots need to get permission basically from Westminster to have a second referendum on independence. Do you think that will happen? So the next Scottish Parliament election is due in May 2021. I think that will be a key moment. If the SNP wins a majority, they will claim a mandate, certainly, to hold a new independence referendum. Boris Johnson has always insisted that as Prime Minister, he would never grant another independence referendum because he sees the first one as having been a once-in-a-generation occasion. I think I'm not going to predict whether we'll have one or not, but I would predict that we're going to have, an almighty clash of mandates over it if the SNP does win a majority in 2021. It's going to be fascinating times. Jack, thank you very much indeed. Jack Sheldon there, researcher in politics at the University of Cambridge. I'm sure we'll be talking about devolution and independence and Scottish National Party politics for quite some time to come. No doubt tomorrow we will be seeing Ian Blackford in all his glory. I don't know whether he will be in his man cave or whether he will be back in the chamber in the House of Commons for Prime Minister's questions tomorrow, but I'm sure he'll have plenty to say. We've got plenty still to say and more of your calls to take. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. Ian Collins coming up, of course, at 1 o'clock. He'll be here shortly to tell us what's going on his show. And then Dan Wootton's here from 4. And a special treat tonight, James Whale back at 7 o'clock with Ash and followed by Kevin O'Sullivan as well. So loads going on. Lots of great things to listen to. Let's go back to the phones, though. Susan is in Sheffield. Hello, Susan.
Oh, hi.
How you doing?
Hi, Mike. Yes, not too bad, thank you, considering.
Well, considering, yes. Well, we're all still here somehow.
Yeah, the point, well, I mean, there's so many things that can be said, aren't there, about everything, but your drive to get people back to their city centres.
Yes.
Mostly London. I think it's quite, people I've spoken to, younger people, they just, apart from everything that's been mentioned, I think the masks are having a really detrimental effect.
You think?
On people's ability to even think. I mean, I've never worn a mask on a motorway. Well, I know that your view is, just do it. But I just
I mean, I to be honest, I wouldn't advise anyone else to do what they don't want to do. All I would say is that I do it when I'm asked to do it, just because I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I differ on that. But the point I want to make is that when I see people walking around in masks, they seem changed. They seem changed. They're just almost giving up and just walking around, not able to think, not being dynamic, sort of.
Yes.
And the continuation of the mask wearing does make everything seem really weird.
I agree with that, and I find it very odd to see people walking in the street with a mask on, because I don't do that. I put it on if I get on a public transport, in a bus or a tube. I put it on if I go in a supermarket. That's it.
Exactly. And I think that this is one thing that is upsetting people. I was at the that protest or gathering, whatever somebody wants to call it, in Sheffield.
Oh, yeah.
Where, on Saturday.
Was it pretty well? This is the anti-mask one.
It was more. There were groups from all sorts of persuasions, and it just, as far as I can gather, it wasn't really arranged by anybody in particular, apart from maybe Stan X, I don't know. But there were groups, everything from a church, with a banner about Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life, to people, something about 5G. But mostly, there were lots of banners that said "smiles, not masks."
Right.
And I think it's a big concern to people because, I mean, I want to go into town and have a walk around, but it's just so horrible. The atmosphere is horrible. Even going through a shop to get to a cafe, I just find it hot, and it's not human.
No, I agree. What were the policing? What were the policing procedures like on this march or this gathering?
Well, it was just we got there. People were gathering from about 12 o'clock. I think we got there, myself and husband, about 12:15.
Right.
And we stayed till about 1:30. So we weren't actually there at the end when people escorted, the people of Sheffield escorted Piers Morgan to wherever he was going, and then the police intervened and arrested him. But I
didn't know he was there. Was Piers Morgan there?
He was arrested and kept in jail overnight.
Oh, you mean Piers Corbyn?
Sorry.
I suddenly thought, hang on a minute.
Oh, thank you.
What was Piers Morgan doing there?
No.
I mean, some people think he should be arrested, but, that's another story.
Yeah, well, I think he's I don't think he...
Yes, it was funnily enough, somebody asked me about this yesterday. Said, why are you not talking about Piers Corbyn being arrested? And to be honest, I didn't know that he'd been arrested.
Yeah. Well, it was quite strange. And, well, I can tell you that myself and husband we noticed police were at the background taking films or pictures. And we sort of left a little bit, I think it was halfway through. I spoke to a couple of them and said, oh, hi, excuse me, what is it that you're doing, taking pictures? Or yes, we are. And one particular guy was so antagonistic. He just came across as a thug. It was just, well, what do you know? Or something. I can't, I said, well, I can't talk. I'm just going. I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
I was surprised, actually. and everyone was so peaceful. Just people, we felt. I mean, I spoke to a number of, just chatted, and people saying, we can't. Why are we wearing masks at this stage? And it's not. People are just confused, and it makes everything seem horrible. And just ordinary people, but there were a lot of police around.
Yeah.
And yes.
No, listen, I share your misgivings about it all, Susan. You're absolutely right to have them. And, I can't tell you not to have them in the same way that, those who are frightened and want to wear masks, I can't tell them not to. It's a very strange situation. But listen, thanks for your call. Let's talk to Paula, who's up in North London. Hi, Paula.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you doing?
Mate. I'm very well, thanks.
Good.
Just a couple of, good. I hope you're well too. Sorry about that. Just a couple of things. In regards to the COVID.
Yeah.
My other half came back and I spoke to you. He went away on family.
Yes.
Because it was family in Cyprus.
Mm.
He came back yesterday to Luton. Absolutely no checks, no questions, nothing. And I was really shocked. And what I would say is they need to go the way Cyprus is going, which you cannot go beyond their border control until you've had that test or you've got a certificate. End of. That is the end of it.
Did you not tell me you had to get one before he went in so that you could show it?
Yeah, what happened is he got the news on the Friday. He flew on the Sunday, so he had between Friday and Sunday to get something sorted out.
Right.
I think it was Thursday. We looked all around, and the closest one was in Welwyn Gardens, and it was like a drive-through test, but you had to pay. I think it was like £150, £180. I'm like, no way. So what he did was the Cypriot government have a form online. You fill it out. You have to prove. You have to prove where you're going, where you're staying, everything else, and what your intent. Well, everything. You just have to put everything on there.
Right.
And basically, then you have to agree. That will be the be all and end all if you get past that border. You have to agree. If you have not had a test before leaving, you have to have one up on arrival, which I stated was €80.
Okay.
80 euros. The other thing quickly, Harry, I actually think, this is my thinking, that the royal family have given the go-ahead for this Netflix and for them to keep their titles, because I think what Harry has said is to his family, look, we need to generate this cash to be independent, but we will need our titles. Not the HRH, but the main Duke.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex,
I think the royal family has agreed to that, but no one's saying anything.
Right.
But that's what I think is where they're at right now.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
That may well be a good theory. We shall explore it next time we have a royal correspondent on and find out if that's the case. Paula, thanks very much indeed. Another show draws to a close after lots and lots of you called in. If you didn't get on, please do forgive me. You can get on tomorrow. Usual rules apply. Very busy at the moment. And, of course, the busyness continues all afternoon. Ian Collins coming next. Mr. Collins, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Mike. Yeah, I'm a bit confused. I'm concerned, actually. I'm disappointed more than anything about one of the government chief medical advisors. I know you've touched on this, the doom warning.
Yeah.
3,000 people. Now,
this is old Van Tam or whatever his name is, right?
Jean-Claude.
Yeah, Jean-Claude.
Him, yes. He's given this. It sounded like it's sort of prophecy of doom. Frankly.
Yeah.
This is terrible. I can't be the only person. I thought, well, surely this was meant to happen. We're going to get these cases among younger people in particular.
Yeah.
The focus is
it's happened everywhere else.
Looking after the older people. That's where the focus should be. So if there's any area that needs to be doubled down on, older, vulnerable people, that's fine. The fact that, most of these 17 to 21-year-olds wouldn't have even known they'd had it.
No.
That's how mild this thing was.
And they say even now that all these people who are testing positive, many of them won't know they've had it
Correct,
either.
yeah. I have no idea.
Right?
No idea.
What's the point? What does it mean?
Indeed. And, of course, when they see the numbers, we've seen it happen, this postcode's got to stop seeing that postcode. Nothing.
Right.
Are they arguing this from the right perspective?
No.
Because this is going to lead to more chaos, and the last thing we need is another lockdown.
I know.
As we're beginning to
I just
ease
don't
out
think...
of it.
I spoke to a guy in Melbourne today who sounded so depressed.
I
felt awful
bad,
for him.
haven't they?
He said 2 suicides in the street this morning.
Wow.
2 ambulances called. And you just think, we can't do that here.
Because they've been in lockdown, then they were out, and then we're back in.
But they're in a proper
weeks.
23, and also they don't mess around there. It's like, you can't go out. There's a curfew, and you get arrested. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's really bad. Well, listen,
up
fascinating stuff. Ian Collins after the news at 1, Dan Wharton from 4. I'll be back from 10 tomorrow.
Talk Radio.